All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the fourth meeting of the Legislative Commission in calendar year 2024. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Backus. Present. Assemblywoman Dickman. Here. Assemblywoman Howdeggy. Here. Assemblyman O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Here.
Senator Daly.
Here.
Senator Dondero Loop.
Here.
Senator Hansen.
Here.
Senator Krasner.
Here.
Senator Stone.
Here.
Vice Chair Harris.
And I am here. Thank you. This afternoon, we have 6 members attending at the Nevada Legislature office building in Las Vegas, 4 members in Carson City, and 2 members attending virtually. We do have a quorum present, but before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. I'd like to ask all those who testify to state and spell their names for the record before testifying. If anyone would like to receive a copy of the Commission's agendas, minutes, or reports, you may be added to our mailing list by following the links on the Legislature's website or by providing information to our staff. Contact information for staff is also listed on the Legislature's website. In addition, we accept written comments, which may be emailed or mailed before, during, or after the meeting. The information regarding where to send written comments is also on the website and listed on the agenda for this meeting. We'll move on to item number 2, which is public comment. We will be accepting public comment at this time from persons present here in Nevada Legislature office building, then from those attending the meeting at the Legislative Building in Carson City, and then from the persons wishing to provide public comment by phone. If you prefer to wait to speak until later, there will be a second period for public comment at the end of the meeting. Please remember that comments will be limited to no more than 2 minutes per person. If there are any people in our audience here in Las Vegas who wish to provide public comment at this time, please come forward to the table in front of the dais. All right, not seeing any, we'll go ahead and move to Carson City. Is there anyone in Carson City who'd like to provide public comment at this time?
Looks like we have 2 up here.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll ask each person who wishes to speak to identify yourself for the record each time you speak, and ensure that you sign in on the clipboard by the door before you leave. We'll go ahead and start with whoever'd like to begin down in Carson City.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. My name is Nick Shepak, S-H-E-P-A-C-K. I am the State Director of the Fines and Fees Justice Center. We are here today in support of R097-24 regarding the Board of State Prison Commissioners. This regulation has been 4 years in the making. First, Senator Scheibel ran a bill with the support of the department to have the Department of Corrections go through the public rulemaking process for any item that pertains to costs charged to offenders. What we have in front of us with this regulation is the first time we have an actual fee schedule publicly available for the Department of Corrections. We have caps on all the fees, and we have a significant reduction in the amount of money that will be charged for commissary. Nevada was had one of the highest commissary costs in the entire country. This brings us in line with national averages and will bring extreme relief to families of incarcerated individuals. We want to thank the department for all their work with us on this, and we encourage you to pass this regulation. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mary Brzezinski, here representing Nevada Association of School Superintendents, and my name is spelled Pierczynski. And I want to address a concern that the Nevada Association of School Superintendents have regarding it's on your agenda, item 4, sub D, and it's Regulation 099-23A. It's found on the third page, and it deals with graduation requirements. And the Nevada Association has expressed concern and objected to the implementation date of these new graduation requirements. We were at the April 15th hearing and the July 31st hearing, and talked about what I'm talking about now, which is the new graduation requirements would impact kids who are in high school now. And if the graduation requirements are going to be changed, and this is the addition of world history or world geography, then that should start with the class of 2029, the 8th graders who will be going into high school next fall, and not impact kids who are already in high school, who have been on a graduation plan, whose parents have agreed to that graduation plan. This will cause a lot of disruption. So that's why we've been opposed to it before, just because of the implementation date. And we're here again today to voice our concerns with you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jody Hocking, Jodihockking, and I am the founder and director of Return Strong. We are an organization that works with both incarcerated people and families of the incarcerated, and I'm here today in support of our 097-24. And I just wanted to say that for us, this has come, for some of us, has been decades of knowing that there was a problem with pricing on commissary. And we just want to thank everybody that has been involved in it. We're extremely grateful with the new administration to be able to sit down and have conversations that are transparent and find solutions to issues. This not only is going to be a benefit to people who are incarcerated, who frequently are going hungry and frustrated with that system, it also actually impacts the public health of families and children and people who are outside of prison, because we're the ones, the vast majority of the time, that are providing support for people. And so thank you for considering it, and thank you to the director for his work with us on it, and Fines and Fees Justice Center.
Okay, is there anyone else in Carson City who'd like to provide public comment today? All right. Looks like we can move on to persons who'd like to provide public comment by phone. If you've called in and you'd like to speak during this part of the meeting, you'll be notified by our broadcast and production service staff when you've been connected and it's your turn to speak. Please remember that comments will be limited to not more than 2 minutes per person. You're welcome to submit any additional comments in writing, and they will be added to the record for this meeting. If you prefer to wait to speak again until later, there will be a second period for public comment at the end of this meeting. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over now to our broadcast and production services to queue up anyone calling in to speak. Just a reminder, a member of BPS staff will inform you when it's your turn to speak. BPS, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. The public lines are currently open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Just another friendly reminder to anyone watching, we'll have a second period of public comment before we adjourn today. We will now turn to agenda item 3, which is approval of the minutes. Commission members, you have in your packet the draft minutes for the Legislative Commission meeting held on June 18, 2024. These are draft minutes. These draft minutes are also available on the legislature's website. Let me first ask, is there any discussion on these minutes? All right, I'm not seeing anyone for discussion at this time. I would accept a motion to approve the minutes of the Legislative Commission.
So moved.
I have a motion from Speaker Yeager. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Majority Leader Howdy. Rather than do roll call votes today, I'd like to do a voice vote to make the meeting go a little more quickly. Any discussion on the motion that's on the floor?
Madam Chair?
Okay, seeing, yes. Yes,
just want
Assemblywoman
to-
Dickman.
I won't vote on this since I was not present for the meeting.
All right, Assemblywoman Dickman, that's of course your choice, but I do want to note that it is okay if you wanted to vote in the affirmative for the minutes, even though you did not attend the previous meeting. We've had that issue raised before, and I believe that's the common practice.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
All right, any other discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, can you please signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
And if there's
Aye.
anyone opposed, please say nay. Okay, the minutes for the June 18th meeting of the Legislative Commission are approved. That takes us to agenda item 4, which is the administrative regulations. Our legislative counsel, Asher Killian, is with us today in Las Vegas to assist us with this item. We have 3 categories of regulations for consideration today. Item 4A is a request for the early review of a regulation under NRS 233B.0681. Items 4B and 4C are requests to continue regulations not adopted within the 2-year deadline set by NRS 233B.040. And item 4D is regulations for consideration pursuant to NRS 233B.067 and 233B.0675. There'll be a quiz later. First, we'll start with item 4A. There's one regulation that's submitted for early review pursuant to NRS 233B.0681. That section provides for the early review of a proposed permanent regulation after the agency is given notice of a hearing on the regulation, but before the hearing is held. If the Legislative Commission approves regulation under this early review section and the permanent regulation is adopted after the agency's hearing is identical to the regulation submitted for early review, the Legislative Council is required to promptly file the regulation with the Secretary of State and notify the agency of the filing. If the regulation adopted by the agency is not identical to the one submitted for early review, the regulation must come back to the Legislative Commission for approval in the same manner as if early review had not occurred. A copy of R076-23, the regulation submitted for early review, is posted on the Nevada Legislature's website under the tab for this meeting, which you will find by hitting the button in the upper right corner of the homepage, which says View Events. I believe Victoria Carrion and Chris Eccles, representing the Division of Industrial Relations of the Department of Business and Industry, are here in Las Vegas to answer any questions that the commission may have regarding R076-23. Do we have any questions regarding this regulation? All right, I don't have a view of Carson City at the moment, so if you have any questions, this is your chance to pipe up. All right, not seeing or hearing any, do I have a motion to approve the proposed permanent regulation R07-263 under early review pursuant to NRS 233B.081, so that if the permanent regulation adopted after the agency's hearing is identical to the regulation submitted for early review, the Legislative Council is required to promptly file the regulation with the Secretary of State and notify the agency of the filing.
So moved as stated.
And we have a motion by Speaker Yeager. Is there a second? Second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed, please say nay. All right, the motion is approved. Thank you both for being here. Next, we'll move on to item 4B, which is a request by the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada to continue a regulation R029-22 that was not adopted within 2 years after submission to the Legislative Council as required by Section 4 of NRS 233B.040. An agency that has not adopted a proposed regulation within 2 years from the date that the regulation was submitted to the Legislative Council has two options if they wish to proceed with the adoption of the regulation. The agency may, one, request a new regulation containing the same provisions and begin the hearing and adoption process anew, or two, the executive head of the agency may appear personally before the Legislative Commission and explain why the proposed regulation has not been adopted. Today, Stephanie Mullen, the Executive Director of the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada, as well as Sam Crano, are here with us in Carson City to request that the process of adoption for R029-22 be continued past the 2-year mark. Executive Director Mullen, you may proceed.
Thank you, Vice Chair Harris and members of the Commission. I am Stephanie Mullen, Executive Director for the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada. And we have a proposed regulation, LCB file number R029-22, that the PUCN adopted 13 days after the 2-year deadline. We do apologize for the length of time this regulation took to bring before you. We decided it was best to request an extension under existing LCB file number than to initiate a new rulemaking that would increase costs for the state stakeholders related to further noticing and an additional workshop and hearing. As many of you may know, this was a very important topic with many stakeholders, and we wanted to work on the language as much as possible before we brought it to you for approval. For example, while we averaged 3 workshops for any particular rulemaking, we had 9 for the regulations involved in this matter. And while we usually get a few comments from interested parties while crafting language, we had almost 70 comments in the wordsmithing phase, an additional 4 comments on language of the revised regulation that we put together following the vetting prior to the final workshop and hearing. Additionally, while these regulations provide more clarity to parties regarding what to include in applications under applicable statutes, we were still able to implement the new statutory language to accomplish the legislature's goals while the regulation was being developed. So again, we ask you to forgive the fact that the PUCN adopted this regulation after the deadline, and we are not asking for additional time. The regulation has been adopted by the PUCN and is before you as an agenda item later on in this meeting. Thank you for your time and this afternoon, and Hearing Officer Sam Crano and I are available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do any members of the commission have questions for Director Mullen? And again, I can't see my folks in Carson City or online at the moment, so if you have any questions, pipe up. Okay, not seeing any questions. Do I have a motion to approve the proposed permanent regulation R076-23 under early review pursuant to NRS 233B.081 so that if the permanent regulation adopted after the agency's, oh, I'm sorry, my apologies. That's the wrong motion.
Don't say all that again.
Yes. Oh, this one's not much better. Okay, my apologies. Do I have a motion on R029-22 to allow the adoption process to continue?
So moved, Chair.
Okay, we have a motion from Speaker Yeager and a second from Senator Stone. Any discussion on that motion? All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, those opposed. Thank you. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Okay, that motion passes. Next, we will move on to item 4C, which is a request by the Nevada Tax Commission to continue a regulation R100-22 that was not adopted within 2 years after submission to the Legislative Council as required by subsection 4 of NRS 233B.040. As was the case for the last regulation we discussed, an agency that has not adopted a proposed regulation within 2 years from the date of that regulation being submitted to the Legislative Council has two options if they wish to proceed with the adoption of the regulation. The agency may request a new regulation containing the same provisions and begin the hearing and adoption process anew, or the executive head of the agency may appear personally before the Legislative Commission and explain why the proposed regulation has not been adopted. Today, Shelley Hughes, the Executive Director of the Department of Taxation, as well as Yvonne Navarez-Goodson and Sarah Glasner, are here with us via Zoom to request that the process of adoption for R100-22 be continued past the 2-year mark. Executive Director Hughes, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Legislative Commission. My name is Shelley Hughes, SHELLIEHUGHES, and I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Department of Taxation. I'm here today to request a continuance for the Legislative Commission to approve adopted regulation, LCB file number R100-22, pursuant to NRS 233B-040, subsection 4. Proposed permanent regulation R100-22 has a lengthy history. This regulation was originally submitted to LCB on June 13th, 2020, and given LCB file number R076-20. Given the impacts of COVID on all agencies and the demands of the 2021 legislative session, the department did not receive the draft back from LCB and instead was given a new LCB file number approximately 2 years later on June 15th, 2022, which is the current file number R100-22. Between the months of July 2022 and October 2022, the department staff worked with LCB to draft language and respond to questions from the drafters. As the regulation was being drafted by LCB, Governor Lombardo issued Executive Order 2023-003 in January 2023, requiring all executive branch agencies, boards, and commissions to freeze the issuance of new regulations, conduct a comprehensive review of existing regulations, and prepare a report to the governor's office by May 1st, 2023, with recommendations for regulations to be repealed and any other regulations that could be streamlined, clarified, reduced, or otherwise improved. The executive order also froze all proposed regulations that were pending at the time and required specific approval by the governor's office or exemption from the executive order to proceed. In response to the executive order, the department issued a report on May 1st, 2023, identifying 27 chapters of NAC that would require various provisions to be repealed, amended, or added to comply with the governor's order. The department also requested various exemptions to proceed with otherwise stayed regulations, including R100-22. This was a monumental project for the department given the volume of regulations within its jurisdiction. On July 1st, 2023, the governor issued Executive Order 2023-008, lifting the freeze on the regulatory process. The governor's office also confirmed its exemption for R100-22 to proceed through the process. Given the demands on resources of the LCB and the department, our records indicate we were working with LCB drafters on regulation language through April 2024. With the final draft regulation provided to the department on May 20th, 2024. The department utilized the weeks and months thereafter to provide sufficient time for small businesses to respond to questionnaires, post a 15-day notice of workshop, and thereafter a 30-day notice of public hearing. The Nevada Tax Commission only meets once every other month. Notably, there were a number of regulations pending from the department that were initiated in 2020, but were otherwise delayed by COVID, the 2021 legislative session, and the executive order. Each of the other regulations ultimately received a new file number by LCB after the 2 years, but this one was inadvertently missed in the timelines. A final draft was issued by LCB with only 1 month remaining for its adoption before the 2-year timeline lapsed. Accordingly, the department respectfully requests your consideration of the continuance to approve this regulation after the 2-year timeframe. It was adopted by the Nevada Tax Commission at its June 25th, 2024 meeting, only 10 days beyond the 2-year deadline of June 15th, 2024. A significant amount of work went into the drafting and review of this regulation, along with public workshops and hearings pursuant to the governor's executive order and required processes set forth in NRS Chapter 233B. The regulation is necessary to provide clarity in the existing regulations to ensure compliance with statutory changes that were enacted in 2019 in Senate Bill 81. With me today are the department's Chief Deputy Executive Director, Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, and Management Analyst, Sarah Glasner, who manage all of our regulations and work directly with LCB regarding the regulatory matters. I will defer to them to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commission members, any questions for Director Hughes?
I do have one, if I may. It's
Okay.
Assemblymember Anderson.
Oh, that's correct. Assemblywoman Anderson, go ahead.
Quite all right. So thank you for the extensive timeline. It makes sense why this has taken so long to get forward. And I'm not sure if this is part of the current discussion or not, or if it needs to be a future discussion. On section 2 on page 3, there is discussion about a refund request. It's actually in section 2.3. Do they have the same amount of time as in 20 days, which is mentioned in the NRS statute, or would that need to be defined in statute? And therefore not part of this language?
And Director Hughes, I'm just going to step in very quickly here before you respond. Assemblywoman Anderson, under this particular item, we are considering the extension. If we grant and allow the adoption process to continue, we will reconsider the substance of the regulation in a later part of this meeting.
Thank you so much for that clarification. I completely forgot about that part. Kind of an important part to remember. Thank you.
No, absolutely understandable. Do we have any questions about the delay of submittal of the final regulation? Okay, do I have a motion on R100-22 to allow the adoption process to continue?
So moved.
Motion from Speaker Yeager. Is there a second? Second from Senator Stone. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying yay.
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 All those opposed, nay. All right. Hearing none, that motion passes. Finally, we will move on to item 4D. There are 60 regulations that were submitted for approval pursuant to NRS 233B.067, including R029-22 and R100-22, which were just approved by us for a continuance. Additionally, we'll have 2 regulations that were deferred at a previous meeting and are being considered pursuant to NRS 233B.0675. These regulations are all contained in the notebook provided to the members and posted on the Nevada Legislature's website under the tab for this meeting, which you'll find by hitting the View Events button in the upper right corner of the Legislature's website homepage. There is also a public copy of the notebook on the sign-in table at each end of the video conference. At this time, I'll ask commission members if there are regulations to be held for further discussion. Once we pull all of those out, we will take a motion to approve the remaining regulations. Then we will come back to those regulations that we hold for discussion in turn. Just to keep it simple, I'm going to go ahead and just list off the list of regulations that I have already been notified that folks would like to pull. That is R188-22, R194-22, R039-23, R102-23, R003-24, R026-24, R031-24, R078-24, R082-24, R086-24, and then back to the top, R119-22, R165-22, R167-22, R063-23, R065-23, which will be heard in conjunction with R19-22, R099-23, R008-24, R041-24, R093-24, R059-24. Okay, and I will now then open it up to commission members if there are additional items you would like to have pulled for separate consideration.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have several.
Senator Hansen, please.
I want to double check on that. Did you say R19522A? Is that on your list? If not, I want to put it on it.
It is not R195-22A.
Okay, then I've got R026-23. Then R09523. R03224. R04124. Well, that's on yours. I'm sorry. That one I caught. And last, R07524.
Okay, let me repeat those back to you, make sure I got them all. R195-22, R026-23, R095-23, R032-24, R075-24.
That's my list. Thank you.
Of course. Anyone else?
Madam Chair,
Chair?
Senator Daly. Sorry. I just
Go
wanted
ahead,
to,
we'll start with Senator Daly and then move to Assemblywoman Dickman.
Yes,
Go ahead,
thank-
Senator Daly.
I just wanted to confirm, did you say R118-22? I misheard.
I did.
Okay.
It
thank
is
you.
on the list.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just have a quick question on 033-24.
Okay, R033-24.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Anyone else? Just one second, Senator Stone. Assemblywoman Anderson, you had a question about R100-22. And so with your permission, we'll go ahead and pull that for you to ask that question, okay?
Sounds great. Thanks.
You're
Now?
welcome, Senator Stone. Not quite. Wait till we get to the actual regulation part. Hold on. Senator Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had four to be pulled. I think you already mentioned three of them. The one I didn't hear, forgive me if I missed it, is 118-22. That was pulled as well. Okay. I also was going to pull 119-22, which I think you called 165-22, which you called 194-22, that you called, I believe. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay. I think that's a sufficiently comprehensive list, unless anyone has any more to add on. All right. All right, I don't see any additional regulations to be pulled at this point. I'll be looking for a motion to approve the remaining regulations under this item that were not pulled. Do I have a motion? We do. We have a motion from Senator Stone. Is there a second?
That include the ones that pop up. I will second the motion.
And a second from Speaker Yeager. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay. Motion passes. Now we will get back to the regulation. Turn myself off. Now let's get back to the regulations that have been pulled for further discussion. And we will take them from the top of the list as listed on the agenda. The first one is R100-22. And we will invite up Director Hughes, who I believe was on virtually. And Assemblywoman Anderson, once we get Director Hughes queued up, you can ask your question, okay?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. This is Yvonne Navarez-Goodson. For the record, I'm Chief Deputy Executive Director here at the Department of Taxation, if I may be the one to respond.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for jumping back on, and I'm sorry, you got a little preview of it earlier, I guess. With the language that is being proposed, the refund request is in section 2.3, excuse me. Is the same amount of time necessary, which is mentioned in the law, or is that needing a separate law? And currently, the NRS statute, I believe, states that it's 20 days for the language. So do the individuals, or excuse me, the small businesses have 20 days to request that refund as well?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Assemblywoman Anderson. If I understand the question correctly, this is Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, for the record, Chief Deputy Executive Director with the Department of Taxation. Requests for refund typically have a 3-year statute of limitations so that taxpayers can request a refund within that 3-year time period.
If I may have a follow-up, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So just to verify then, there's no need for a separate NRS to state that that is there. Instead, it would be continuing to go with the current practice of all refunds for taxes. Is that what I'm understanding you state?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, through you to Assemblywoman Anderson, Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, for the record. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair. And is it appropriate for me to do a motion at this time for approval?
Absolutely.
I would like to make a motion
Yes,
to
we'll take a
approve
motion.
then, if I could.
Can we have a motion from Assemblywoman Anderson? Is there a second? Second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? All right, not seeing any. The regulation is approved. Oh, look at that. Got a vote. No discussion on the motion,
Friday afternoon.
but would anybody like to vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay? Okay, now the motion passes. Thank you so much. We'll now move on to our 118-22, which is a regulation revising provisions related to provisional licensure. All right, and I believe Senator Daley, you had a question here. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I did, when I was reading this, and I just want a clarification, and I think some others may have questions as well. I think Senator Stone and Assemblywoman Anderson, well, my colleagues, sorry, I'm not supposed to use names, my bad. So when you're getting rid of the passive competency test in, I think it's section 1, subsection 2, when I was looking at that, I originally had concerns, and then when I got further down into section 2, and tell me if I'm wrong, the way I read it, section 2, subsection 5, if I read that correctly, and then I tried to follow through to the paragraph E of subsection 2 of Administrative Code 391.057, it adds in back a requirement, or you're trying to add in back a requirement that they completed all academic requirements prescribed by the chapter for license or initial license, which I think would include the competency test. The only other thing I found on that is the reference, and maybe our staff can fix it, when they say paragraph E of subsection 2 of Nevada Administrative Code 391.057, there is no subsection E in subsection 2 of that, but there is a subsection E in subsection 3, which adds that language back in. So maybe we can confirm both of those things. And I'm not sure what other questions there were, but I had just concern about getting rid of the competency test, but it's going to be added back in someplace else. That was the question. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Senator. We'll go ahead and, if you want to go ahead and respond, and then we'll have Legislative Council also respond to your second part of your question with regards to references in the regulation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Jeff Brisky, Jeff, B as in boy, Riske. I'm the Director of Educator Development, Licensure, and Family Engagement at the Department of Education. I'm also the Secretary to the Commission on Professional Standards in Education. You are correct in seeing that the competency exam for the ARL conditional license was moved from the beginning of the license to when it's time for them to convert to an initial standard license. So you did read that part correctly. Regarding where that may be mislabeled, referring back to 057, we did touch that regulation as well, and I'll let LCB answer that. Thank you.
Mr. Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Council. Yes, so since Section 1 of this regulation is actually amending NAC 391-057, what used to be subsection 2 was deleted, so subsection 3 became subsection 2. So that reference to paragraph E of subsection 2 in Section 2 is now correct as a result of the amendments from Section 1 of this regulation.
And thank you for clearing that up. Those were my only two questions. I just wanted to make sure they were going to still have to do the competency and that we had the right reference. Thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion or any, first, let me ask, are there any further questions? Senator Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chair, I think.
Let's go Senator Stone.
So
first,
I think my questions kind of mirror my good friend up in Northern Nevada. When I read Section 1, it says it removes a requirement for the alternative provisional license, which includes reading, writing, and mathematics. And so as I've heard the explanation, this is taken away at the beginning of the process, but when they actually get the license that they have to satisfy these requirements. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it right.
Jeff Brisky, for the record, yes, that is correct.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and did you have a question, Assemblywoman Anderson?
I did not. It was at the senator to my right actually asked it earlier. Thank you. So I'm more than happy to make a motion if you'd like me to adopt this regulation.
I will accept said motion. Okay, let's consider that a motion then. We have a motion from Assemblywoman Anderson, a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? All right, motion passes. Thank you so much. Oh, you're here for the next one as well. Great. We will then turn to R119-22, which is a regulation revising provisions related to licenses to teach middle school or junior high school education. And I will turn it over now to Assemblywoman Anderson, who I believe had a question on this one.
Sorry about that, Chair. We were a little bit distracted up here for just a second. My question has to do with, there's a lot of commas in Section 1 of R119. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly with one area that appears to have been taken out of Regulation 119, but might be in Regulation 065, and that is the English language learners. Is there, it's not mentioned, English language learner education is not mentioned at all in Regulation 119, but it is in Regulation 065. Is that done on purpose, or is there a plan to cross-reference this? I'm a little bit concerned about removal of how to teach our language learners and more importantly, how the educators are get that development.
And thank you for that question, Assemblywoman Anderson. That reminds me that we're going to be hearing 119-22 in conjunction with R 065-23, as that only makes sense. And so as commission members are considering this item, if you have questions on either one of those regulations, this would be the time to ask them.
Jeff Brisky for the record. Thank you for the question. Apologies, I'm not seeing where English language learners is referred to in 119. Or maybe that's maybe that's your question because it's not in there.
That's correct, because I believe it has been taken out, if I'm remembering correctly, in one area. Let me look for it as well, because you guys were busy and looking through all these different education things. There was a lot of them. I thought that there was something that had to do with, or maybe it was possibly the fact that it's not mentioned at all in this area and should have been at one point or another. So I guess it is maybe the fact that it's never been mentioned and should be, considering that it is incredibly important to our schools. So just wondering where exactly then our English language learner items are specifically brought in.
Jeff Brisky for the record. No, I don't think it was in any of the previous NACs that are covered under Regulation 119. And now I'm going to look over at 165, and I don't see that it is in there either. I do remember discussing it at a previous commission meeting. I don't think we came to consensus on a regulation, so it still may be pending workshop.
So just to verify then, there is discussion though about how to provide these services to our to the individuals who are becoming licensed in English language learners areas. Is that correct? And that language is still being considered with the Commission on Professional Education. Is that what I'm understanding you are saying?
Jeff Brisky for the record. I would have to check with staff. I believe there is an English language acquisition development regulation, but I'm not sure where that, you know what, I think it has passed, but I don't have that number, that NAC in front of me. It would be in NAC 391 additional endorsements, probably 200 area. I'm not sure where it's at. But yes, we do have that endorsement. It has passed. So anyone who does want to obtain that ELAT endorsement, it is available to them in many of our prep programs as the initial prep program, in the initial prep program. And I think Asher's looking.
And we'll go ahead and let Mr. Killian supplement that response as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just trying to find that section of NAC. It's 391-237.
Thank you so much. And then my other question, still under the same area, if I may, and same regulation. It appears that the commission creates the cut score for this one, but in prior regulations, it is a superintendent's decision. Is that correct, or is it always the commission that makes that decision on a cut score, or is it always a superintendent decision to make that that creates that cut score?
Jeff Brisky for the record. I believe it is in statute that the commission always approves the cut scores for each one of the exams.
Okay, so it's approval, but the superintendent is the one that makes the recommendation. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, we discuss it at the commission, and we vote on a cut score for each exam that we adopt.
So when you take a look then at, let me make sure, sorry that I do not have my notes right in front of me of exactly where I saw that. Okay, So thank you so much for that clarification. And unless there's other questions, I am comfortable giving, asking for approval of this regulation, making a motion, unless there's others. Oh, in conjunction. Oh, that's correct. If you are comfortable, Chair, with both of the items I asked to be pulled at the same time. Sorry.
No, you're perfectly fine. Are there any additional questions on R119-22 or R065-23? Senator Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues. It's great to see all of you in Northern Nevada and here. Going back to the 119-22, existing regulations require an applicant for a secondary license with an endorsement in career and technical education to adhere to a number of things, including completing 1 year of certain verifiable work experience aligned in the subject matter, which can be offered as a part of the career and technical educational program. Section 3, as you can read, eliminates the requirement that the applicant complete 1 year of verifiable work experience. It would seem to me that that would be an important component for somebody to teach career education. I was curious as to why that was taken out.
Jeff, thank you for the question. Jeff Brisky, ND, for the record. For our B&I pathway, we currently require 2 years of business or industry experience because they did not go through a teacher prep program or a CTE program. For the teachers that we license under the CTE pathway, they do have to go through a 4-year teacher training prep program. So with all that coursework, we felt the additional work experience was a barrier to that license.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from the commission? All right, not seeing any at this time, I will accept a motion to approve. Motion by Senator Dondero Loop. Do we have a second? Second from Speaker Yeager. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Not hearing any, the motion is approved. We will now go on to R165-22. This was requested to be pulled by Assemblywoman Anderson. You can go ahead and ask your question when you're ready.
Thank you. And yes, I was busy. Anyway, as was, it appears, the Education Department. With R165, was just wondering why the decision was to remove early child care education, as I know that we are currently trying to do more and more to bring more people into the fold of education as a career. I believe it's on page 06 of the proposed legislation or regulation, excuse me.
Thank you, Jeff Brisky, for the record. This regulation 06522 goes along with regulation 14522. They both have to match. This regulation was from the Commission on Professional Standards. The other regulation is by the State Board of Education, and they are specific to the career and technical education areas that are approved. So we had to make sure that both of those regulations matched. Regarding specifically while childcare was removed, that I would have to rely on one of my colleagues who may be here in Las Vegas or up north, why that particular area may have been removed.
So I'm not seeing anybody coming from the audience here in Carson. Is there anybody coming from in Vegas?
We're contemplating it.
Phone a friend.
All right, looks like we have a taker.
Or reluctant take.
Give us just a moment, Assemblywoman, okay?
Oh, turn me on. Look at that. Hi, thank you for the question. Anna Reynolds, for the record, Assistant Director of Career and Technical Education for the Nevada Department of Education. The reason that childcare is removed because that is not a CTE program.
So,
And the licenses have to align with the CTE program, so.
so if we were to try to do an apprenticeship of some sort, we would not be able to do it through the CTE program. Is that what I'm understanding you say?
No, if you look at all of the different licenses, they align with the various CTE programs that we offer. For example, agricultural education, we offer CTE programs that are the agricultural field. If you look at business education, we have a CTE program, business education. So childcare is not a CTE program, to whereas we have teaching and training, which covers early childhood education, as well as other teacher pathways. So I believe that early childhood education would be covered as opposed to childcare.
So thank you so much for
Thank
that
you.
clarification. Perfect.
Assemblywoman Anderson, if you'd like, we also have Mr. Killian available to add some flavor to it.
Yeah,
Okay,
it makes sense.
thank you. All right, lovely. Great, thanks. Would you like to make a motion at this time?
I would like to make a motion to adopt our 160, what is this? 165-22, I think is what the number.
Correct. And we have a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Not seeing any, regulation is approved. We will now move to R 167-22, and I will turn it back over to you, Assemblywoman.
Thank you, Chair. My question for R167, would the department receiving information about an educator, could this documentation be used against an educator when renewing their license? I guess, and what I'm really asking for, what is the purpose of this documentation, the request for the documentation of the testing being taking place?
Jeff Brisky, for the record, thank you for the question. The regulation itself was always a requirement, but we put forward this regulation to show multiple pathways of how to obtain the training. Regarding your question specifically about why we may want to audit that, I think that it's pretty standard practice that we put in any regulation that at any time we may want to pull that or ask districts to provide that information if at any time that it is necessary. I'm not sure under what circumstances we may do that. In my tenure, I don't remember pulling any audits for that particular reason, but I think that's just a safeguard that we put in a lot of different regulations.
Thank you so much for that explanation. That's what I thought it might be, but I wanted to double check. So Chair, if you'd like me to, I would be more than happy to make a motion to adopt Regulation 167.
Unless anyone has any other questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and accept that motion at this time. We have a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, nay? Okay, Regulation 167-22 is approved. We will now move on to Regulation 194-22, which is a regulation establishing provisions governing applications and licensing of persons who sell energy, capacity, or ancillary services to eligible customers. Senator Daly, I believe you had a question on this one, and we should have Mr. Sam Crano available for you in Carson City.
We do. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I apologize. I know this is an amendment. You guys are coming back with this. But I'm looking at Section 2, subsection 2, regarding language on information that the provider can say, hey, we want to keep this confidential. And then it says that the commission will grant the protective order if it is determined that the request for information is commercially sensitive and requires confidential treatment under Nevada law. So I was curious if that was in there before. I should have asked before, sorry. What are you actually going to use? Are you going to use actual statutes? Are you going to apply case law? Is it more of a educated understanding of what sensitive confidential information is? Or is there state law on this specifically that says these types of things can be confidential if they ask? So I was going to want to know, what standard are you going to use?
Certainly, thank you. Sam Crano, Utilities Hearing Officer at CRANO, for the record. Yeah, thank you, Senator. There is a statute, but it has fairly similar language to this. It's 703-190, I think. And it's basically if it's commercially sensitive information or a trade secret. And there is some case law, and there's some commission precedent on things that we've done in the past. But mostly it's the utility requests confidentiality, or in this case, the provider requests confidentiality. Staff, the Bureau of Consumer Protection, any other party can object to that claim of confidentiality, and then the commission will determine. Sometimes we take briefing. We always look at the information, and the BCP and the staff look at the information, get copies of that confidential information also. It's just whether or not it gets disclosed to the public at large. But we just use the standards we've been using for 703-190 for.
Understood, and I appreciate the answer. In other committees, there's been questions about what is a public record and some of these things. It's a sensitive area for some people. I understand the trade secrets. I understand proprietary information. And we have that in other areas of statute, where, for instance, when they do design, build, construction, they put in proprietary methods of building, and that eventually it may become public, but not in the preliminary processes. So there is a process, as you alluded to, so other people can object. Whatever determination you make, if you say it's confidential, people can seek judicial review if they wanted to in those cases. So there is a process, and you guys, I just wanted to get something on the record regarding that, because some people will say everything should be open. And I know that's a gray area too many times, so I just wanted to have that on the record, that there is a process, and it's not just somebody's whim.
Yes, Senator. Sam Crano, for the record. Yes, Senator. There is a process. It can be appealed to a court, or to the full commission, because usually the presiding officer, one of the commissioners, or myself, whoever's case it is, makes the initial determination. It can be appealed to the full commission, and then after that to a court if people are dissatisfied with the commission's ruling. And yeah, it's been a process. It's been in place. The general standard is if the ratepayers are going to have to pay for anything, then that's public, because they should know what they're paying for. But as far as there are some trade secrets that different utilities don't want each other to know, basically. And so we
understood, and I'm not opposed to it. I was just sensitive to it based on some other discussions in possible legislation that might come up. That was the only question I had. Madam Chair, if there are no others, when you are ready, I'll make a motion.
Are there any Senator Stone?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm concerned about Section 4 that provides that the commission determines that there's probable cause that a provider has violated any applicable laws or malfeasance, that they can hold a hearing and they can actually revoke a license. But also under Section 4, it authorizes a provider whose license has been revoked to file an application for a new license. Is that immediately after the license has been revoked, or is there a time period for them to correct their ways, if you will, and then come back for a reapplication?
Thank you, Senator. Sam Crano, for the record. We don't have a cooling off period, so to speak, in the regulation. I suppose they could apply immediately, but the commissioners and myself, the ones making the decision, or the commissioners are the ones that are making decisions, don't turn over all that regularly. So if we've just revoked someone's license, it's unlikely that right away they'll get it right back. But you are correct. There is no cooling off period in the regulation. They could apply immediately. It's would go through the hearing process at that point to see if there's a reason that they've changed their ways enough to get the license back.
So if I could continue, why do we even have to see this language in there that they can provide a new license when anybody can file for a license if it's been revoked in probably any other agency? Why do we have to put this into the regulations? Just seems kind of illogical to me that if you've been revoked, that you're probably going to get revoked again if you apply for a license, because I'm sure the facts that were considered in revoking your license are still applicable.
Sam Crano for the record. It does make sense, Senator. And I mean, as you said, they can apply for a license, but then it would go to a hearing process, and it probably at that point wouldn't get granted unless there's some extraordinary circumstances that have changed in the intervening amount of time, however much time that was.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any additional questions on this particular regulation? Seeing none, I will accept a motion to adopt. Do we have said motion?
Motion to adopt R194-22.
Okay, I have a motion from Senator Daly. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Speaker Yeager. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Yes, nay.
Okay, one nay from Senator Stone. The regulation is approved. We will now move on to R195-22, which is a regulation revising provisions relating to exemptions and annual limits of energy and capacity sales. And this, we will turn it over to Senator Hansen for his question here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, it's a 42-page reg. One of the most complicated regulations I've ever tried to read. Seriously. What that actually means, I have no clue. I mean, I read it and like, my gosh. Here's the bottom line for me, though. There was a big concern when some of the big energy users, especially big casinos, were going to leave and go and buy power independently, because they basically subsidize a lot of the smaller consumers for the grid and so forth. Does this regulation now allow them to leave? Because at one time there were big giant penalties and they were very upset about it because they could obviously buy energy less expensively through different sources, but if they actually did that, the costs for maintaining the grid and so forth would be passed on to all the small consumers. So I'm kind of wondering, does this reg cover those kind of costs, or is there some protection in there for essentially the smaller consumers, residential users and small businesses, especially, I would assume, in Clark County?
Sam Crano for the record. Yes, Senator. The large casinos that left were assessed an exit fee, which was designed. Basically, what we did is we ran modeling of the grid itself with their load and then without their load, and figured out what the cost difference was. And then they paid that over a 6-year period, which allowed growth to take up their place. And they did that so they could get cheaper power elsewhere. Although, interestingly enough, some of them want to come back now because the power markets fluctuate with a lot more volatility than the electric company. But this reg and SB 547, which generated this reg, contains more protection for the smaller customers. Basically what it does is it sets a maximum amount of capacity that can go 704B. So a certain number of megawatts basically can leave every 3 years, and that's set in the IRP process. So 3 years ago in the IRP, it was set at 11 megawatts per year for 2022, 2023, and 2024, and there is an IRP currently pending from the power company where they're going to set a new limit for 25, 26, and 27. And then The reg also sets forth the procedure for a company or an entity to apply for that capacity, and the process for, again, generating an exit fee. So they would still have to pay an exit fee for the whatever period is appropriate for their load. Larger loads, it's generally a larger time. And so that is contained in the 43 pages of regs. It is fairly complicated, and that's the reason it took us so long to bring it to you. But those protections are built in there, yes, sir.
Okay, well, I'm just going to have to go on your word on that because honestly, when I read through it, it was like, whew, man, way over my pay grade. But that was my concern. So as long as the regulation is attempting to make sure that if a big consumer of power leaves, that the cost that would be normally paid by that big consumer is somehow fairly distributed and it doesn't fall on the backs of smaller consumers, really what I'm getting at. And your testimony is, yes, that's the purpose of the regulation.
Sam Craner, for the record, yes, Senator, that is the purpose.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair. That answers my questions.
Okay, Senator, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, my
question?
apologies. We have additional questions. I'm sorry, jumped the gun there. Senator Stone.
Not a problem, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. Appreciate the indulgence. You know, we're doing everything we can to encourage businesses, residences to use more energy efficient infrastructure, solar panels, windmills, et cetera. In Section 12, it says it prohibits an eligible customer from receiving certain energy efficiency and renewable energy portfolio credits. So if you have a company out there that has done a great job of reducing their electrical needs through the utilization of clean energy, if you will, green energy, and the business is expanding and they need more energy, maybe even just at the same threshold that they originally were using electricity prior to the green enhancements, why wouldn't they get any credit? And what would be the procedures for them to get more energy use to further their business needs?
I think that was for you, Mr. Crano.
I apologize. I forgot to turn on my mic. Sam Crano, for the record. Basically, that's dealing with portfolio credits transferred from the utility in those earlier cases between 2015 and 2017 when companies left. With their exit fee payments, they were transferred a certain amount of portfolio credits, basically in proportion to the amount of those payments that were for renewable energies that was signed by the company in order to serve them initially. And this just limits the amount that the power company can transfer to them if they sign a contract with a renewable energy provider for a solar program. The news recently showed MGM just signed a contract with a solar provider. They will get all the PECs from that contract. They just won't get any more from the power company because they are no longer buying those from the power company.
Okay, so they've virtually been given the credits, and by putting this in there, you're preventing, I guess, double dipping for those credits. Is that the way I understand it?
Sam Crano, for the record, yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, any additional questions? Okay, Senator Hansen, would you like to make a motion?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I move that we pass R19522.
All right, we have a motion from Senator Hansen, a second from Senator Dondera Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed, nay? All right, that regulation is approved. We will now move on to R026-23, which is a regulation revising provisions relating to boilers and pressure vessels. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Senator Hansen for his question.
Thank you. Is there anybody there in Clark County coming to the desk? I have a question.
Absolutely.
Aha, there they are. Good.
They're
My
ready
question,
for you whenever you're ready.
Okay, my question on boiler definitions and BTUs. I ran into a situation, as you may know, I am actually a mechanical plumbing contractor. About 10 years ago, we put in, I actually did it myself, some giant water heaters at Mendive Middle School in Sparks, and we ended up having a big fight with the boiler inspector because at the time, the BTU requirements, I think it was 399,000 or greater, required them to meet boiler standards, even though they were clearly water heaters. I'm just wondering, does this regulation deal in any way, shape, or form with that, and has that been cleared up? Because in this case, it caused a huge problem for Western Nevada Supply, for the water heater distributor, and for Washoe County Schools. So I'm kind of wondering, have we cleaned that up? Because they were clearly water heaters and they were not boilers.
Thank you for the question. Victoria Carrion for the record. Through you, Madam Chair, to Senator Hansen. So the issue you're talking about regarding water heaters and whether they are defined as boilers, that was cleared up in a prior regulation statewide, so we no longer have that issue. The particular regulation you have before you is related to boilers actually that are in mining facilities, so it's very specific to that.
Perfect. No, I saw that the mining thing, but I wanted to make sure that if we had an opportunity to perhaps clean it up if it hadn't been. It sounds like it's all done. Excellent. Madam Chair, that's all my questions. So unless somebody else has an additional question, I'll be happy to make a motion.
Any questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and take that motion, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move we pass R026-23.
All right, we have a motion from Senator Hansen, a second from Senator Stone. Is there any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, hearing none, the regulation R026-23 is approved. Thank you. We will now turn to R039-23, which is a regulation revising provisions relating to bargaining units. And I believe this question was from Senator Daly.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And I think the questions might be answered by, one of them might be answered by legal. And that had to do with the severability, the part that they're deleting. I just wanted to understand that a little bit better. It seems to me if there was something that was declared unlawful, there had to have been a court case and they would declare specific provisions. Is this language really not needed because all of the rest of them would already stand unless the court struck it down? And maybe that's the legal side of the question. And the second question maybe for the gentleman at the table is also in that when they delete the mailing list and notices, just want to get on the record that you guys have an electronic list. People have received that same information instead of a mailing list through email or some other method. Just want to make sure that people are still able to get that information. You're putting it on your website, you're sending out electronic communications or something of the sort. So whoever wants to go first.
I'm Bruce Snyder, Commissioner of the Government Employee Management Relations Board. Thank you for the questions. With regard to the mailing lists, yes, we have robust email lists. We have almost 700 people roughly on our email lists. It includes all the governments who appear before us, all the labor and employee organizations, all the attorneys who practice before us, plus anyone else who has an interest in our agency. We have monthly newsletters. We send them out. That started in February of 2014. We have not missed 1 month since then, and we are proud of our newsletters for getting out all the information. And we contact our people fairly regularly, apart from even the regulations. For example, every time a new statute is passed, we send copies to everybody on our mailing list so they're aware of the new statutes that are passed. So we were told that we had to come up with a certain number of regulations to kind of repeal or streamline when this process started. And unlike some agencies that have very extensive regulations, ours are pretty small to begin with. So we tried to find things that we thought were not controversial, and that's what ended up on this list here. With the severability, this was, I believe, discussed with the LCB drafter, and it was decided, I believe, to leave it in. Maybe Asher knows more about the internal aspect of that.
Senator Daley, would you like to hear from Mr. Killian a bit about the background on the drafting process?
Sure.
Mr. Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. So as you may be aware, there is language in the preliminary chapter of NRS that provides effectively a severability provision for all of Nevada law. That was adopted in 1977. This particular regulation of the Employee Management Relations Board actually predates that. I believe it was adopted originally in 1971. So with the adoption of that provision into the preliminary chapter of NRS, this section of NAC is no longer required because it's effectively preempted by that Nevada law-wide severability provision. So the repeal of this section is effectively eliminating duplicative language in NAC that's already covered in NRS.
And thank you for that. I just was making sure on both of those things. It was as I suspected, but some things you just prefer to have on the record. The communication to the public and the people that are concerned, wanted to make sure when they got rid of the mailing list that was still available and robust. Ready to make a motion unless someone else has a question, Madam Chair.
Any additional questions? All right, not seeing any. Senator Daley.
Make a motion to approve R039-23.
Is there a second? Second. We have a second from Senator Stone. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, and the regulation is approved. We will now turn to R063-23. And I believe Assemblywoman Anderson, you had the question on this one.
I am so sorry, Chair. I did not have a question on this. I probably sent that in incorrectly. So please accept my apologies. And if there are no other questions for people, I'm more than happy to bring forward a motion to accept it. So I'm sorry I sent in that number incorrectly.
No, that's okay. Go ahead and make the motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt Regulation 63-23.
All right, we have a motion from Assemblywoman Anderson, a second from Senator Stone. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, hearing none, the regulation is approved. And we already did our 065-23, but you can go ahead and stay, Mr. Brisk. I'm gonna try and save you a little bit of steps today. And I believe you have one more on the list.
00824.
Okay, let's go ahead and consider R 008-24. And that was Assemblywoman Anderson.
And this time I did mean to do that. So when I read through it, thank you, Chair, by the way. When I read through this information, it feels like there's two different topics that are being discussed. The first has to do with the parental engagement and family class, which I believe is to comply with SB 442. And the second appears to be the initial $20 increase in licensure renewal, and then the subsequent $5 incremental increases for licensure renewal. My questions are mostly about the second issue. Is this, is the $5 incremental increases that it's being proposed basically consistent with all the other professional licensure requirements or renewals that we've done in the past? Excuse me.
Jeff Brisky, ND for the record. I started with the department in 2018, and that was I believe that's when the last time fees were raised was April of 2018. So a few months prior to my tenure here in state service. So I can't speak to that question, but I can tell you the reason we put in $5 incrementals is to keep our office solvent as we are completely fee funded without having to come back and request a regulation change every year.
And thank you for that clarification. So I guess my question would be, to our legal counsel, if this is consistent with other professional organizations that require a licensure fee increase, if this is also something that has been done in the past.
Mr. Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. I'd have to do a little bit of research to see if this has been done historically by other licensing bodies. I don't recall having seen a structure like this before, but that by no means doesn't mean that it hasn't happened before. I'm not immediately familiar with it, and I'm happy to look into that and get some information back to you.
I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. So I think that research is very important to know about. And then my other question has to do with, if I understand how this has been presented at this time, if this were to pass today, September 13th, and somebody's licensure is due on September 15th, would they need to pay this additional, I think it's $20 increment at this time? Or is there any sort of, structure or plan to make this a little bit of a educational purpose for other individuals who are trying to renew their license? Or is it upon the passage of this body's decision to adopt resolution 008, would that increment be started right away?
Jeff Brisky for the record. Yes, upon adoption and after it's filed with Secretary of State's office, that's when we would change the fees in our system.
Thank you. So what is the plan for letting current license holders know about this incremental increase?
We will be sending out memos, as I do with after every single commission meeting. I have what's called a COPS conversations, where I meet with all the HR directors and all of the LEAs, as well as our ed prep programs. And I will be sending out a memo in regards to that to those parties.
There we go. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate what the department is going through with the difficulty and how there is a staff shortage at this time, but I am not comfortable without knowing the other licensure issues. I'm not comfortable at this time, but I'm only one vote, so other people might be more comfortable. So thank you so much, Chair, for that much time for questions.
Absolutely. Commission members, do we have any additional questions on this regulation? Okay, not seeing any, I will accept a motion at this time.
I think everyone else is good. Thank you, Chair. I would move to approve R008-24.
Okay, we have a motion to approve from Speaker Yeager. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Majority Leader Howdegi. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? Nay.
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 Okay, so we have Senator Stone, Assemblywoman Anderson, Assemblywoman Dickman, Assemblyman O'Neill, and Assemblywoman, am I missing somebody?
Senator Krasner.
Senator Krasner and Senator Krasner. And the regulation is approved. Thank you. We will now move on to R095-23, which is a regulation revising provisions relating to continuing education definitions and disclosures. Senator Hansen, I believe you have a question on this regulation, and I believe we have Ms. Arnold available for questions.
Good, okay. Somebody's up there, I assume in your neck of the woods. We're on R09523, right?
Correct. And actually, Senator Hansen, we do not have someone here in Las Vegas.
Uh-oh.
BPS, by chance, do we have Ms. Arnold available on the Zoom?
Arnold, for the record, I'm here.
Aha, good.
Yay. Okay, Senator Hansen, go ahead.
In your clear and concise explanation of the need for the regulation, you wrote, this regulation was in response to 2023 AB 244, which, as enacted, violates ethics codes for licensed psychologists as it relates to psychological examinations and testing. I've never seen that in any of these regulations before. Essentially, the state passed a law that is going to force psychologists to violate what are industry-wide ethical standards? Am I reading this correctly?
That is correct. That Laura Arnold, for the record, Laura-Arnold, I'm the executive director for the Nevada Board of Psychological Examiners. AB 244 got a very robust and very concerned response from Nevada psychologists. And in response to that, the board worked with those concerned to set out a statement about the response to AB 244 that is available on the board's website. And that clear and concise statement that you have there is taken from that statement that the board has made public.
Okay, well, no, that's very interesting. I've never seen in fact, I have a question for legal. Can the state of Nevada force members of an industry to violate their own ethical codes? I guess that's for Asher.
Mr. Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. So unless the ethical codes have the force and effect of law, which is to say unless they were passed by the state legislature or Congress as a law, then the state retains authority over those to whom it chooses to grant licenses and can impose standards that vary from any professional standards that may exist within the community. Professional standards are generally set by nonprofit organizations that are not governmental organizations, so the state does have the right to override those by law.
Okay, well, so legally we can do it. But since this is an ethical question, the question should be, should we? My oldest daughter is actually a psychologist. And, you know, she didn't bring this to my attention, but I just thought, wow, this is really an unusual regulation. A question again for the industry representative. Does the regulation that you are proposing now put you within the confines of being ethically within the bounds of whatever it is that we're telling you to violate ethically? In other words, if this passes as you wrote it, is it now ethical by your industry standards?
Thank you for the question. Laura Arnold, for the record. So what the board has done, and they worked with those that appeared and gave comment, other psychologists that were concerned, as we gave them some tools in terms of the verbiage of the regulation to help them navigate what they think are the ethical perils that they think AB 244 imposes on them. And then we will work further with them if this regulation passes. We'll work further with those psychologists in terms of policy that aligns with this proposed regulation.
In other words, no. So it was a nice attempt. All right, no, Madam Chair, look, this is a very, very awkward. I don't know how we can pass a law that basically tells members of this industry to violate what is apparently a nationally known standard. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to be opposed to this regulation on that basis. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hampton. Ms. Arnold, can you give us just a little bit more information about what ethical standards are perceived to be violated by the legislation and by virtue this regulation?
Laura Arnold for the record. Thank you for that question. If it would be okay, I'd like to just read the board's statement in response to AB 244. It's not very long, but it might help shed some light and answer your question, if that would be okay.
Sure, absolutely, please.
Thank you. So on our website, there's you can click on a link that says State of Nevada Board of Psychological Examiners Statement in Response to 2023 AB 244. And the statement is, AB 244, which was enacted during Nevada's 2023 legislative session, establishes certain rights of a person compelled to submit to a mental or physical examination under certain circumstances. As enacted, AB 244 violates ethics codes for licensed psychologists and creates risks to public safety by creating conditions under which psychologists are to, 1, undertake psychological examinations such that it places them in a position of violating the assessment procedures stated in NAC 641.234, as well as laws governing the release of proprietary material and ethical codes that protect standardized test content, and 2, administer standardized measures such that they are likely to invalidate those standardized measures. The conditions that AB 244 create for psychologists may also have unknown effects on the validity of other measures administered and further risk public safety because of the interpretability of test data collected under those conditions would be compromised, and the long-term effects of the release of protected material would be harmful to the practice of psychology.
Madam Chair?
Thank you for that, Ms. Arnold. Yes, Senator Hansen.
Since AB 244, I think it is already law, I guess the question is this regulation going to make it less onerous? And perhaps we should, as a legislative body, recommend we revisit that law in the next legislative session. Because, you know, they're stuck with the law, whatever the regulation ends up being, and it sounds like they're trying to come up with a regulation to try to make it less onerous on their industry. So maybe my idea of voting no on this is counterproductive. They're trying to come up with some way to balance the two conflicting problems they have here. So I don't know if I could ask the industry lady again. I'm sorry, I forgot her name. Is this going to, if we pass the regulation, is it going to make it less of a problem before we have a chance to revisit the ethical issues in the next legislative session?
Laura Arnold for the record. Thank you for the question. And yes, that's the intent. And this went through several workshops and hearings to get to this language so that these psychologists had these tools, these verbal, the written tools to kind of navigate AB 244.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And those
Go ahead, Ms. Arnold, you can finish.
I was just going to say it just helps. It creates some definitions and some distinctions so that they're not worried about you know, HIPAA violations and compromising the integrity of the testing data, testing materials, protected information, those kinds of things.
Okay, thank you. With all of that information, Senator Hansen, would you like to make a motion at this time?
Yeah, ironically, I will. I think we should pass R095-23, so that's my motion, with the caveat that we make sure that in the next legislative session, we revisit this.
And Senator Hansen, unfortunately, the only aspects before us today are to approve or deny the regulation. And so we have a motion, I believe I heard, to approve the regulation.
Yeah, it was. It was.
And
I just threw that out there for
BDRs for every
edification.
legislator to use.
No, I know. I've been on this
Got it.
legislative commission about the whole time I've been in the thing, so I know I can only do, it's very limited to what we can and can't do. But I just want to get that on the record that we you know, it's not right for us to try to force people to do things that are unethical in their industry. But yeah, okay, rephrase it. I vote that, or I make the motion that we approve R095-23.
Thank you, Senator. Is there a second? Second from Speaker Yeager. Any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? All right, and that regulation is approved. We will now turn to R099-23, which is a regulation revising provisions relating to diplomas. Assemblywoman Anderson, you're up.
Shocking, I know. So thank you so much. My question has to do with both what was brought up during our earlier comments, and then also just double checking that the time frame is for our current sophomores to have this change, or is it our current ninth graders to have some of these changes? When you talk about the arts and humanities and some of those other areas, I'm confused with the timeline that's happening when we've got some students that have already started their high school plans.
Thank you for the question. Deputy Superintendent Anne-Marie Dixon, Department of Education. For this one, I'm going to defer to my colleague, Alicia. I don't have the timeline in front of me. Is this sophomores or juniors? I'm sorry, seniors.
Thank you for the question. Alicia, A-L-I-C-I-A, Briançon, B-R-I-A-N-C-O-N, for the record. Thank you for the question. As far as the timeline, this would be, as you heard from public comment from Mary Przynski with NAS, the request is specifically for, as it's written, it would be impacting those graduating in 2027, and they would like it for it to be those graduating in 2029. So it will be impacting 8th graders currently, and the request, and we understand, based on their feedback, we understand their concerns with the scheduling to meet the students' graduation requirement needs. And so the request is for those graduating in 2029.
So the class of 2027, which are basically our current sophomores, would not be required to take the flex credit as referred to in some ways. Am I understanding that correctly?
As this, with this regulation, so just a little bit of history with this regulation, the school districts are already offering the world geography, world history credit. The placement of the credit is either in the arts and humanities credit line, the flex credit line, or I have it in front of me, or the elective credits. And so this is really about the alignment based on the 2023 legislative recommendation from LCB and legislators to align the language between the NAC and NRS. And so the school districts are already offering this world geography, world history credit for the standard diploma requirement. This is really more about the alignment in the language for the regulation for NAC. And so, yes, as far as the timeline, so that it's not impacting current sophomores, the request is for it to move to the 2029 graduates.
Thank you. I think the other thing that I've heard from educators across the state, not just in the two large districts, this is mostly in the smaller districts that we're hearing it from, or that I've heard about it from, are there enough licensed personnel to be able to provide these classes, which, yes, are already being provided in some cases. It's not consistent. So are there enough licensed personnel to be able to provide these courses to this year's 8th graders in, I don't know, White Pine or in some of our other smaller districts? That, I think, is the concern that I've heard from others. So just to verify, there are enough licensed personnel to do this across the state for our current 8th graders.
Deputy Dixon, would you like to answer?
Yes, Anne Marie Dixon for the record. Director Statuki did reach out to rural districts as well. They felt like they could meet this if they're given enough time to make sure that they are able to hire for those positions. So as was already stated, we do have that class currently being taught, but it's being utilized under a flex credit or other credits currently. So they do have staff in the majority of districts and did feel like with the extension of time, they could meet that requirement.
Okay, thank you, because I kind of heard something a little differently today. So thank you for that. So then just to verify as well, would the fine arts credit still be a requirement of graduation for our current 8th graders, or would that be taken away to make way for the geography and or world history, which is something that has unfortunately made its way into some of the conversations as well?
So Anne Marie Dixon for the record, and Alicia, please, if I'm incorrect in this, I'm going over the wonderful table that you put together for me. Thank you. We do have the arts and humanities, JROTC or CTE would be counted as one credit that would be required.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have additional questions? Sure, Senator Dunn-Darrell.
I don't know if this is a question, but I'm just going to make some clarifying comment. I think we need to understand that what we're saying is it's not, we just want this to start in 25, 26 with those students that are going to enter high school that year and subsequently would graduate in 29. So it's just a delay of the start so that it's consistent with students' high school classes, because the kids that are already in there have already started their classes. So if we wait and start with a fresh freshman class, it will make it much more consistent. Said like a true teacher. Chair, I guess the question I would have, and it might be for Mr. Asher, do we need to send this back? Can we clarify that and vote on it, or do we need to send it back and have that in the actual regulation? Because right now the regulation does say on page 8, it does say for a pupil in the graduating class of 25, 26, 27, and 28 units for the required courses. And so that creates a problem because all those, I mean, we've got kids that are seniors. So does this need to go back, and we'll hear it at another time?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Council. If the intent is not for a pupil in the graduating class, or in the graduating class of 2025, which would be a pupil graduating in 2025 to complete that credit, then it would need to go back to have that language be revised to reflect the commission's intent. I believe the department has represented that they could use waivers to give it the effect that the commission desires. I would just note that that's obviously not binding. If you want it to be binding in the regulation, then you would need to send it back. But there is a path forward to approve the regulation today and still have the effect you want based on the department's administrative actions.
Then, Chair, with that information, I think that what I would do to make it clean and to make it consistent with what our education personnel are saying, that we would send this back and have it rewritten for a pupil for a pupil starting in a graduating class of 2029. That may be cleaned up a little bit, but I would delete all those graduating years and then just put for a pupil in graduating class of 2029 moving forward for the required courses must be earned accordance with the following table.
Assemblywoman Bacchus.
Thank you so much, Chair. I was diving into the bills that kind of triggered some of these changes and am in agreement with pages 8 and 9. It doesn't seem like they really do comport with what Senate Bill 249 had gone with, because it seemed like there was some flexibility and some choice for some students for 2 units of credit in either American history, world history, or geography. And that already went into effect. So I'm assuming the schools are making sure that students are meeting those requirements. But when you look at pages 8 and 9, it provides specific credits that are now kind of going retroactive. So obviously that would need to be cleaned up. And also in that bill and that statutory provision, I understand that the school districts could work with the students and give waivers, but that just seems kind of messy. But I think the big one was AB 274, unlike SB 249 that was effective at a certain date, AB 274, which addresses the financial literacy and moving that with the economics, that does not go into effect until we pass the regulation. So it seems like we do already have laws on the book that have to be complied with what student graduation requirements are, but it is confusing when it's all grouped together and now giving set units. When you look at the bill that was passed, it didn't have set units, rather it was more of a flexible up to the 2 units of those 3 classes. So there's no questions, kind of just thoughts that I was noticing.
Okay, after the committee's discussion, we're going to go ahead and defer this item R099-23. That will allow the Board of Education to take into consideration some of the comments that they've heard from members today and potentially bring back another regulation to the commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will go ahead and turn to R102-23, which is a regulation establishing provisions relating to an electronic filing system. I believe we have Mr. Hardy with us here in Las Vegas. Senator Daly, you can go ahead and ask your question when you're ready.
I'm sorry, we're on 102, right? Yes, okay. So just a quick question. I just want to see how it actually going to work with some of the language that's being deleted in Section 3, subsection 2B, where you can personally deliver it to the other party or their counsel. And I understand that if it's a corporation or somebody, or they don't have a counsel, some people may be trying to hide. So I think you're trying to remedy that by saying you can hand it off to the division in sub 2C, right? But I was curious about the 3-day delay before you guys say it's received, and then how that 3-day delay, if a person tries to or wants to take advantage of that, affects the overall timeline. So if you have 15 days to submit it and serve it on the other party, do I have to submit it to you guys at 12 days? Or can I still go to the 15th day and then you guys will recognize it or receive 3 days later? How is that 3-day delay affecting the overall timeline of all of the steps and the various things that have to take place? Does it shorten it or does it matter?
Good afternoon. My name is Dean Hardy from the Department of Administration's Hearings and Appeals Division, and I'm not sure I followed the question, and I apologize.
Okay, well.
And again, let me just, if you could direct me, you said section 2C?
Section 3, subsection 2B, talks about personally delivering a copy of the document to the other party or their counsel. And you're striking out, leaving at the office of the party or his or her counsel with the clerk or other person in charge, or if there is no one in charge, leaving a conspicuous place therein. You're deleting that language, right? So a lot of times you're going to go to somebody's business, they're not there, you tape it to their door, you're deleting that. That option is gone. I think you're trying to, the way I'm reading this anyway, I don't want to put words in your mouth, I think you're trying to remedy that potential of a person secreting themselves and not being available, purposely trying to evade getting served, right, or getting the document put to them. That I can alternately take it to the hearing division and give it to the hearing division, and then that will be considered served on the other party, but only after 3 days. So you're going to have it for 3 days. So I want to know how that 3 days is affecting the overall time limit. And my example was you have 15 days to serve the other party, whatever the response is to the complaint or back and forth, briefs are being exchanged. How does that 3 days affect the overall time limit? If I want it to be served by the 15-day time limit, do I have to get it to you 3 days shorter? So does it shorten my time to respond or to put in the service? Now, do you understand?
Dean Hardy, yeah. I think so. What we are attempting to do is eliminate paper altogether. That's the purpose of the entire regulation. And the only time in which paper will still be allowed is when there is a pro se litigant. And this particular pro se litigant is someone that's not represented. And so what we've tried to do is eliminate the necessity of serving an individual that has opted out of the electronic filing system, but is represented by an attorney. If an attorney is representing someone, then what we're trying to do is eliminate the duplication of service, and service upon counsel will be deemed sufficient on a litigant that has opted out of the electronic filing system. So what we have currently is a non-digitized system, all paper, no digital e-filing whatsoever, and we may be the only court system in the Western world that still operates like that. So what we've attempted to do was clarify every single provision that might occur, and what this attempt was to eliminate the necessity of sending paper out to an individual that was represented in the case itself.
And see, that's not answering my question. In 3C, it says that you can leave a copy of the document at the office of the hearing division. Next sentence says service by leaving a copy of the document at the hearing division pursuant to this paragraph shall be deemed received 3 days after the copy of the document. Now, the 3 days is existing language. Left at the office of the hearing division. So you eliminated the language that says, hey, I can just leave it with the person at a conspicuous place, whether or not he has a counsel. You're trying to eliminate paper, but you've taken an option away to hand deliver. I'm going to go to this person's last known best address. I'm going to tape it to his door to do my best to get him the information, take a picture of it, make sure we're, sign an affidavit that I had myself and a witness that did it, et cetera, et cetera. So on this 3-day rules, I can no longer do that because you're eliminating that language. How does this 3-day delay affect the overall timing of submitting this? We're talking about workman's comp here. I know you're familiar with it. I also know that there are strict deadlines and submitting claims and doing these things, appealing, going to your hearing officer, all of these things. It's all set in statute. It's got a lot of landmines and things to trip people up. What is this 3-day delay now that you've eliminated me taping it to the guy's door? How does that affect my overall timeline? Do I have to now shorten everything by 3 days under this process?
Dean Hardy again. It does not, Your Honor, or Mr. Daly, it does not, Senator Daly. What we're trying to do is make sure that anyone that is participating in this arena has the ability and opportunity to be served equitably, fairly, and timely. So what we've tried to do is outline every scenario that could possibly occur as a result of this. And this is one that I think will occur on an infrequent basis. But what we've tried to do is try to recognize any options. It's not an attempt to trick anyone, to trip up anyone, to lengthen or shorten any time frame. What we've tried to do is just outline an option by which we can have someone served through the hearing office. And then what we plan to do at the hearing office is then input that into our electronic filing system ourselves and eliminate the necessity of someone that has opted out of the electronic filing system, and it'll be in there in their file, and their counsel will be notified, opposing counsel will be notified, and anyone that has registered on that case will be notified of anything that's occurred. This is not a subpoena to mandate someone's appearance for court. This is a document that is filed like a package of evidence. Normally, it's filed now by paper, having the necessity of some office bringing it to the hearing office and mailing it to opposition counsel and any other party, and this eliminates that. They can bring it, they can take it to this individual. If not, they can bring it to the hearing office. We'll input it into the system. It'll be flagged. As I understand, once the system's up and running and we're close to being operational, everyone that is registered on that case will be notified that something has been filed.
And I understand.
That answer your question?
I understand your goal, and I hear your words. However, I know a few lawyers, right? And I know that lawyers advocate on behalf of their clients. And if I have a time limit that I have to submit a response, so you put in your evidence on appeal, whatever it might be, and you have to serve or you have to give it to all of the parties. And I have 15 days, like I said, from the last correspondence, and I have a date. Now I have a date, right? Let's just use, September 30th as a date. That's my deadline. So if I turn it into you, because I couldn't get the other person, I want to do this electronic thing, they don't have counsel, and I turn it into you on September 30th, you don't deem it to be received until 3 days later. And if I'm an attorney for my client, I'm going to say you're late. You didn't, it wasn't deemed to be received for 3 days, which would be October 2nd or whatever day it's going to be. That's what I want to know is, do I have to now then say, I have to turn it in 3 days earlier than my normal deadline? I have to turn it in by the 27th of September in order for it to be deemed received by the 30th.
Dean Hardy, in response to the question, the timeframes were not contemplated as being changed by this service. What we tried to do was make things simpler, not more complex, a simpler opportunity to have an electronic system where everybody has availability to opt into or out of the system. If we are accepting service, this gives us that time frame to file that. We're going to input it. We, the Department of Administration's Hearings and Appeals Division, are going to input that ourselves for purposes of filing it into our electronic filing system for someone that has opted out of the system, i.e. a pro se litigant. And therefore, this allows everyone the same opportunity and options to review any of the electronic filings. No contemplation is being given to either subtract or add to any deadlines that need to be adhered to.
And I know that may not have been your intent, may not have been your contemplation of various things. I'm just looking at the plain language. I have a person who's opted out, right? You have a 3-day delay. If I'm trying to be safe and not take any chances, my time just got cut down by 3 days because you don't deem it to be received. When you eliminated the old language where I could leave it at the office of the party or his or her counsel with the clerk or other person in charge thereof, or if there is no one in charge, leaving in a conspicuous place therein, when you eliminate that option for me, and then you have a 3-day delay before you deem it received, intentionally or not, in my view, change the timeline. And if I'm an attorney zealously representing my client, I'm going to say you turned it in late. And the other attorney should be saying, hey, you just got cut off by 3 days. If you're going to follow the plain language of the way I read this, the letter of the law. Intended or not, I think that's the consequence of this language change. In conjunction, the two pieces.
Understood. Dean Hardy, I can tell you that we've workshopped this regulation with all of the stakeholders, with attorneys from both sides that appear in the Tribunal of Workers' Compensation. They had input in the drafting of this. They had input in the contemplation of this. They had input in telling us what they wanted and what they didn't want. And both sides agreed to this language at all steps of the way when we originally drafted it and then ultimately changed it at the behest of the stakeholders. This was not done surreptitiously by either side. This was not done without everyone being made aware of how we were going to implement the plan. And so if there is a zealous representative that looks at this and sees an opportunity to take advantage of for their client, that was not contemplated. It was not discussed. We had plaintiffs' lawyers, we had defense lawyers, we had the insurance industry, we had the administrators, we had every stakeholder that appears in this tribunal discussing every aspect of this on I think it was a minimum of 4 different occasions, and received input from all stakeholders, and everyone was satisfied that this language was acceptable.
And I understand that and understand the process, understand the legislative process, and I know we have hearings during the regular legislative session. We have all the stakeholders, we have 2 houses, and we still get things wrong. Sometimes we miss it. Maybe Mr. Killian can chime in and say, with the elimination of the language in B3, subsection 2B, and then the 3-day delay, existing language trying to go electronic in 3C, is there an opportunity for somebody to manipulate it, intended or not? I could clearly, I'm not an attorney, but I could clearly make that argument that it would be. And if that's it, just because everybody missed it or nobody else looked at it the same way, that's why we come to the Legislative Commission. That's why we have people read the regulations. That's why we have a dozen people here with various degrees of experience looking at these things. And we ask these questions because we don't want to have it adversely affect some worker who's injured because his attorney thought it'd be okay to turn it in on the 15th day and you don't deem it received until 3 days after that. I don't want to see that happen. And that's why I'm asking the question and sticking to my guns on this, and maybe Mr. Killian can shed some light.
I'm sorry. Mr. Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. So I believe the senator's reading is correct in that the existing language did not state when service would have been complete if a copy had been left at the office. So I think the point of service that would have been read in there would have been at the point of leaving, delivery would have been complete. This change creates a situation where, since it can no longer be left at the office of the person and be deemed complete when it was left, but instead would either have to be personally delivered and service would be completed upon delivery, or left at the office of the hearings division and service completed 3 days after being left at the hearings division. Yes, it does create a situation where if service had to be left, there would be a deemed delay in when service became effective that may not have existed under the existing regulations. That may be a relatively uncommon scenario, but it is at least technically possible.
And thank you for that. I'm glad I'm not imagining things, but I think that potential loophole needs to be corrected. And I understand, all of the people that looked at it and various things, and they're looking at all of the other sections and really weren't thinking about it in this scenario, which is why we have the Legislative Commission. And so I hope that we would ask them to go back and make that correction, Madam Chair.
All right, can I ask commission members if there are any additional questions at this time?
Madam Chair, I do.
Senator Hansen.
Not so much question as a comment. I think Senator Daly, having dealt with these issues in my business, I think Senator Daly has brought up a very legitimate possible loophole that needs to be closed. So I would agree with him, and I think this needs to go back, and they need to get that language cleaned up. I think Mr. Killian's point is absolutely spot on. So I would urge us all to send this back for a revision. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, any additional questions from commission members at this time? Seeing none, I will accept a motion.
So moved, Madam Chair. Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve from Assemblywoman Howdigian, a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Is there any discussion on this motion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay.
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 All right, if you're a nay, go ahead and raise your hand so I can get it on the record. We've got Senator Stone, Assemblyman O'Neill, Assemblywoman Anderson, Senator Daly, Senator Hansen, and can I see my members online?
Dickman's a
Were you
nay.
yeas?
Dickman is nay.
Okay, and a nay from Assemblywoman Dickman and Senator Krasner. And the motion fails.
As I knew it would.
All right. So therefore, the regulation then is not approved. Thank you.
Chair, may I ask a question procedurally?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Since I voted on the prevailing side, is there a way that I could possibly ask for reconsideration and instead ask for it to be referred back to and ask for it to be deferred so that way it could possibly be worked upon to clean it up?
Assemblywoman Anderson, thank you for the question. The vote of not approving has the same effect of deferring the regulation, sending it back. So the agency can revise the regulations and bring them back to the commission at any time.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome. We will now turn to R003-24, which is a regulation repealing provisions relating to advertisements and alcoholic beverage awareness programs.
Madam Chair, did we skip
And I
over?
believe Senator Daly. Oh, we did skip over 002. I will go back to that one after this one, Senator Hansen. My apologies. All right,
Yes.
Senator Daly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I've got the answer to my question on this, so I don't have one prepared to make a motion whenever you're ready. I'm okay.
All right. Did you
So
want to make a motion?
move to approve 003-24.
Great. Do we have a second? All right, we have a motion from Senator Daly, a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Okay, not hearing any, that regulation is approved. We will turn to R002-24, which is a regulation revising provisions relating to supervision. Hopefully we have Ms. Arnold with us as well, back on the Zoom. And Senator Hansen, I'll turn it to you.
Madam Chair, that one wasn't mine. Mine is R32-24, dealing with liens.
All right, my apologies, Senator Hansen. I thought you felt I'd skipped you and you were on 002. So we will, that was already approved then with the motion to approve all the regulations that were not pulled. Let's go ahead and turn then to R032-24, which is a regulation revising provisions relating to notices. And I will now turn it back to you, Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's some folks from the Contractors Board down there or online, perhaps? Aha, there they are.
They are taking their seats and they're ready for you.
Okay. No, I first of all, the regulation overall is really excellent. I just had a couple of questions. For those of us that are contractors, mechanics liens are one of the most effective things that are out there to help collect debts. The question I have, right now, as I understand it, I don't think this law changes that either. From the last day that a contractor or a worker, for that matter, performs labor, they have a 90-day window to provide a pre-lien notice. Is that still in force with this regulation? Or what is the rule on that? I don't know, maybe it's changed since I had to do one of these a while back.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senator Hansen, for the question. I'm Terry Wyke. I'm the Director of Investigations for the Nevada State Contractors Board. And no, this does not change the 90-day.
Okay, and then on mechanics liens, this only deals with contractors and subcontractors, correct? And only single-family type of work. The reason I ask is, one of the beautiful things about a mechanics lien is you can literally be an ordinary mechanic, a laborer, and you can go down to the county recorder's office. I think for $15 you can file a mechanics lien. Does this in any way do anything with that ability, or is it strictly limited to contractors, licensed contractors?
This is limited to licensed contractors regarding property improvements.
Good. Well, thank you then.
Terry White on behalf of the board.
Good. I think this regulation's really good because it's been a problem because they make it, like you say in your thing, lien law is complex. It shouldn't be as complex as it is. And this regulation, from what I can tell, makes it less onerous, makes it more understandable for all the parties involved, and also remove some potential legal barriers that can be used to prevent somebody from getting paid for their legitimate work. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to make a motion unless somebody else has some questions on this regulation.
Are there any additional questions from members? Okay, not seeing any, I'll accept a motion, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I make the motion that we approve R032-24.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, we have a second from Speaker Yeager. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay? Okay, that motion is approved. We will now go to R031-24, which is also from the State Contractors Board, which is a regulation revising provisions relating to applications. Senator Daley, I believe you had a question on this regulation.
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. I got to go to it. So the question was, and I don't have it up in front of me right now, but I do have my notes. In section 1(2)(f), regarding the renewal and a person's in the middle of a complaint process. So what happens if the contractor has to renew his license in the middle of the dispute that has not been fully adjusted? When do they owe the fine? Does that make sense?
Can you, sorry, Bree Welch, Licensing Supervisor, Nevada State Contractors Board. Can you direct me where you're looking at, please?
Yes, I believe it would be section 1, sub 2F. I'm going to bring it up here in just a minute. Huh? So it says, except as otherwise provided by a court order, payment for any unpaid fines imposed by the applicant board pursuant to Chapter 624, cost owed to the applicant. The way I understood this, if I'm remembering it correctly, was a person is in the middle of an adjudication of a disputed or a contested case, and it says, except unless there's a court order, they have to pay the fines and costs and various things. If they haven't come to the conclusion yet, and they don't owe the money yet, and they have to renew their license in the middle of that process, when do they have to pay the fine, or do they just not get to renew their license?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Again, Bree Welch, Nevada State Contractors Board. This provision, the way I understand it is it relates to new license applications. So if you get an applicant who is applying for licensure in Nevada that had, let's say, a prior revocation and still owes fines and investigative cost related to that disciplinary action, then this gives us the authority to withdraw the application or reject the application since we're still owed money. And it could be the same for if there's residential recovery fund payouts. So the renewal process, if the contractor is licensed, they would go through the disciplinary hearing process. This doesn't impact that process at all.
So this only would apply to someone who used to have a license, got in trouble, got a fine, did whatever. That license is suspended, revoked, just not renewed, whatever. And now he's reapplying under a different business potentially, and then he would have to pay that old fine before he could go forward. It would only apply in that circumstance?
Correct. It doesn't necessarily have to be a prior applicant. It could be somebody who possibly was working unlicensed that maybe got fined with us. If they owe our board any money, regarding, fines, investigative costs, that sort of thing. We would require them to pay that before they submit an application.
I understood. And thank you for that's not the way I was reading it. I was reading that it applied to anyone, not just new applicants, and go out and catch all of the unlicensed contractors you can. That's what I recommend.
Duly noted.
So that was my question, and I think they cleared it up. Thank you.
Commission members, any additional questions? Okay, Senator Daly, would you like to make a motion?
Motion to approve Regulation R031-24.
All right, we have a motion from Senator Daly, a second from Senator Stone. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, and this regulation is approved. Thank you. We will now go back to R06-24, which is a regulation revising various provisions relating to disability services. Hopefully we have Ms. Wickland from Aging and Disability Services. Okay, lovely. Senator Daly, go ahead and ask your question when you're ready.
Is this 026? I'm sorry, I missed.
It is.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. 026-24.
You had me for a second. I'm going, huh? So in section 24, on the hearing, let me go grab it. Give me a second. I believe it's in section 24 regarding the hearings. I wanted to get some clarification on how exactly that was going to work. Are people actually going to get a chance to go in front of a hearing officer, or do they just submit the documentation and some person makes a decision and then they're told of the decision and there was never actually a hearing?
Hi, this is Megan Wickland, MEGANWICKLAND, Health Program Manager with the Aging Disability Services Division, for the record. So we don't have a hearing officer. The process is if the provider wants to appeal, they submit their appeal to our division, and that goes to our administrator, who reviews all the supporting documentation that's submitted by the provider, as well as our quality assurance program staff. And we certainly do have our deputy attorney generals involved as well, to review that information to ensure that we are in alignment with policy and regulations.
And I appreciate that. And I was just looking at and reviewing again. And I know if there's a safety or a health issue or whatever, you guys take action and you say, hey, you can appeal it later, but you're doing that on the premise of protecting health and safety of people that are receiving services. Don't disagree with that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Go back and appeal and do all of this stuff. I was just trying to find out, so a decision gets made, now I can appeal that decision, and it just goes through a review process. I have to just submit my paperwork in the form of a brief or whatever, but you never actually get a hearing.
Correct. There is no hearing process.
And
it's a
been
review
that way
process.
Forever or whatever?
I'm sorry, excuse
It's been that way for as long as you guys...
Yes, this is Megan Wickland, for the record. This is how we've been doing that process, is through a review. Typically, When there is an appeal with our providers, they typically have an attorney involved. And we have our DAGs involved as well to review all the supporting documentation related to why we are moving forward with revoking their certification.
And I just wanted to understand that there wasn't really a hearing. I mean, in most cases, and I know under several other sections of the law, you can't take action until after they've been afforded an opportunity for a hearing. So this may be a little bit different, especially with vulnerable people and receiving services, and you have a higher duty to do that protection. So if this has been what it is, I'm sure they have judicial review rights. I'm assuming they do. Have the right to go to judicial review.
I'm going to have Jennifer Frischman help answer that question. Thank you.
Hi, excuse me, Jennifer Frischman for the record, Quality Assurance Manager with Aging Disability Services. So as Ms. Wickland stated, our administrator receives all of the information from both the provider, if they have their attorney, we work attorney through our Deputy Attorney General. That information then goes to the administrator. If they disagree with that, the next step is appealing that in district court. So it is a quasi-judicial process, yes.
Okay, thank you. And it just seemed odd to me that there was a process they went through and there was never actually a hearing. But if that's the way you guys have been doing it, and they have their right to go to court in the end, so be it. It just seemed different than what I normally see. Go ahead.
Again, this is Jennifer Frischman, Quality Assurance Manager for Aging Disability Services. I would also like to clarify that if this is a Medicaid provider, they all are afforded full hearing rights, and that does go before an administrative law judge.
Okay. No, very, very good. Those were my only questions. It just seemed odd to me, Madam Chair. But if that's their process, it seems to be working. So just thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions, when you come back, I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Commission members, additional questions? Okay, Senator Daly.
Motion to approve R026-24.
Okay, we have a motion from Senator Daly, a second from Senator Stone. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. All right, that regulation is approved. We will now turn to R033-24, which is a regulation revising various provisions relating to healthcare. Hopefully we have Ms. Bradley with us. Looks like we do in Carson City. I'll turn it over to Assemblywoman Dickman to ask her question.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I think it's probably going to be an easy question to answer, but I'm just trying to understand why we're abolishing the locum tenens licensure for physician's assistants. And maybe it's somewhere explained in the reg, but I couldn't find it if it is.
Sarah Bradley, Deputy Executive Director for the Board, SARAHBRADLEY. We're abolishing it because we have not issued one in any time that anyone at the board can remember. Our Executive Director's been there since 2001. So we don't believe that is a license type that we need to have anymore. We do locum tenens for physicians, but physician assistants, we have not issued them. So.
So thank you so much for that, because I just think of, the shortages we have in all areas of medical personnel, but apparently we don't have a need there. So thank you so much for that explanation, and I'd be happy to make a motion if no one else has questions.
Are there any additional questions? All right, Assemblywoman Dickman.
I would move to approve Regulation R033-24.
Okay, we have a motion from Assemblywoman Dickman, a second from Senator Stone. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed, nay? Okay, and the regulation is approved. Thank you, Ms. Bradley. We will now turn to R041-24, which is a regulation revising provisions relating to the tax on live entertainment. And I believe we have someone from the Nevada Tax Commission. Looks like Ms. Navarez-Goodson. Assemblywoman Bacchus, I believe you had a question on this regulation.
I did. Thank you so much, Chair. My question pertains to the change. It just was a little confusing to me that when we're looking at what needs to be maintained in records under, so I'm looking at section 1, subsection 3B2, which may be the only change to this regulation. It has the full amount charged for that service. And then it says without deduction for any service cost, interest, losses, tips, or gratuities, or any other expense. I would imagine when we're looking at amounts charged, sometimes that does not take into some of these other items. And so it was a little confusing to me that we're asking one thing to keep records of amounts charged, but then it's almost like asking to also include other items. And I just want to make sure that's not the intent with this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, Chief Deputy with the Department of Taxation, through you to Assemblywoman Bacchus. I'm looking at the language. The intent of this was really just to confirm that the amount of tax that would apply to that would not account for any deductions, but I'm looking again at your question with respect to the records issue. If you could just give me one moment. Like I said, I think the intent of this regulation was really just to clarify for the persons paying the tax that they would be charged the full amount of the service without respect to any deductions. But I think I see your point that this section deals with records specifically. I suppose, if I may, Madam Chair, again, for the record, Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, I think the better answer here would just be that while we do require taxpayers to maintain all of the records and documentation, we could see circumstances in which a person responsible for the tax might try to apply a deduction. We would want documentation to prove what that deduction was so that we could then assess that tax against that deduction because they wouldn't be able to claim it. Not sure if that would help answer that question, but that is my understanding of that provision.
Thank you, Chair, for the follow-up. I guess where I was struggling is when we're looking at like gross revenue or net revenue, I just have never seen like tips taken into consideration. And so I would imagine when we have a charge, unless, and maybe I'm just not familiar with this live entertainment in particular, but you don't usually see tips included. Usually that seems to be an extra as compared to the amount charged. And that's what was throwing me off, as I was more thinking the tips and gratuities is not something that would be usually a deduction. And so that's kind of what threw me off with this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may, Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, for the record, through you to Assemblywoman Bacchus. If you look at this particular subsection, subsection 3 deals specifically with respect to the charge, the live entertainment tax charge for escort services. And in this particular instance, it's a charge as against a service. And so when we have a service industry, we do see things like tips and gratuities. And so our intention here was to confirm that the full amount of the charge for the service would not include deductions for those types of tips or gratuities.
Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Well, the good thing, we know that since prostitution's illegal in Clark County, we're not dealing with any issues like that right now. So, and we know that these are not cash transactions. They're all done with credit cards, I assume. So it's really easy to audit these. Is that correct? I'm sorry, the lady from Nevada Tax Commission. I mean, how do you audit this?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair, through you to Senator Hansen. One thing I would point out with respect to this particular application of live entertainment tax is the definition of escort service does not include prostitution or services for sexual activities. So escort services specifically defined not to include that. And so we don't have a charge on prostitution in the state of Nevada.
Good, since it would be illegal. But yeah, I know that none of these escort services have anything to do with prostitution. I'm convinced of that. The services that are provided in your existing regulation, it says person or persons. Are these escort services required to keep the names of the individuals that they're providing these services for? Normally in a business transaction, like if I got audited, there'd be two sides to it, right? My customer who said he paid this amount, and then me claiming this was my income to an auditor like yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Yvonne Navarez-Goodson for the record, through you to Senator Hansen. Candidly, I don't know the answer to that. What I would say, though, is that we do require very robust records when we are doing audits of taxpayer records. And so it could be that we would we could have those records, but what I would say is NRS 360.255 would require us to protect the confidentiality of any such records that we received, and that's our confidentiality provision, if that's a concern that you might have.
Okay, I do have a question for legal, Madam Chair, if I could. Right now, as a state contractor, I can lose my contracting license if I don't pay child support, for example. Is there any legal way that the Department of Taxation could use their authority to go after escort services that are caught with underage escorts, or any kind of sex trafficking, or if prostitution is officially going to be, we're going to pretend that this has nothing to do with prostitution, if they are in fact caught in acts of prostitution, that there's some way that the Department of Taxation or some government agency could go after their licensing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. So it would certainly be within the legislature's power to create laws that would have those kinds of consequences. I'm not familiar with whether any of those laws currently exist. I'd have to do a little bit of research and get back to you, but it would be within the legislature's power.
Yeah, no, because it's nothing to do with contracting, but if I, as a contractor, have been in a divorce and I don't pay my child support, I can lose my contracting license. So I think the principle would be similar. Last thing for legal again, right now, both of the two major contenders for the President of the United States have said they're going to eliminate any taxation on tips. Would this law, as passed right now, because it clearly says tips in it, would that be in conflict with potential changes in tip laws if one of those two people win?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. So federal law would only be able to control the contours of federal taxation. Federal law would not be able to prescribe for the states what the states are allowed to tax directly. In this situation, NAC, I believe it's 368A140, provides that for escort services, if the taxable event is a live entertainment provided by an escort who is escorting a person, the department shall apply the tax rate to the total amount expressed in terms of money of consideration paid for the service. So under current regulation, the taxable amount is the full amount of money paid, not excluding any sort of tips or gratuities or any other amount. So that is what the law currently is in Nevada. If there were a change in the federal tax code, that would not require Nevada to change its tax laws to comply with the federal government's decisions on the federal tax code.
Okay, and last question. I don't think this is so much for legal, but if the services, I guess the question is, what services are we, if we're not talking prostitution, what services are being provided by these escort services that are completely legal? I mean, going out to dinner? I mean, I'm just kind of wondering how we're skirting around what everybody knows is the elephant in the room, and that is these escort services are providing prostitution. I mean, that's what they do. And yeah, I know there may be some that don't, but the vast majority clearly are in that business. So I'm kind of wondering, is there a legal definition of the services that can be taxed? Because obviously if they're providing for cash transactions, acts of prostitution, you couldn't legally tax that since it's an illegal act, correct?
Madam Chair, this is Yvonne Navarez-Goodson for the record. If that question is for me, through you to Senator Hansen again. Yes, NRS 368A.058 does define expressly the term escort service to include a person who, for a fee, commission, profit, payment, or other monetary consideration, furnishes, refers, or offers to furnish or refer an escort to a patron, offers to introduce a patron to an escort, or who provides an escort to a patron.
Okay, well then
The term specific.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Pardon my interruption. Go ahead.
The terms, no problem. The term does not include a person who advertises that an escort will provide sexual conduct to a patron, or who solicits, offers to provide, or provides acts of sexual conduct to a patron.
So technically, if these people are doing the audit that you're requiring, any money that they've received that are done through prostitution would not legally be, they wouldn't be required to provide any of that information. It'd be very interesting to see what the total amounts you guys get from these services actually is compared to their actual gross revenue. Because you could certainly find, I'll bet, that the actual legitimate things that you just mentioned that they provide versus what they actually provide are substantially different. And we're talking a huge cash economy there. You know, the number of people that are paying with a credit card, I'll bet, is pretty slim. But anyway, I'm sorry if I ran this one to the ground a little bit, Madam Chair, but I'm fine with taxing these. I think we should tax the heck out of them. But I also think that at some point we better quit being hypocritical and criticizing rural Nevada where prostitution's legalized, while in Clark County you have these phony escort services that are clearly doing what you guys claim you don't do. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from commission members?
No question.
All right, not seeing any. Assemblywoman Bacchus, would you like to make a motion?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll go ahead and move for the approval of R041-24.
Okay, we have a motion from Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second from Senator Stone. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, and the regulation is approved. We'll now turn to R059-24, which is a regulation repealing provisions relating to reporting requirements for dropouts. I believe we have Mr. Zoots with us. Hopefully I said that correctly. Assemblywoman Anderson, when you're ready, go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. So just to make sure that I'm understanding that the reason why this is being repealed is because of the language that was from AB 400. In particular, this information is still going to be utilized, however, for the School Funding Commission, or is it utilized for other areas?
Peter Zutz, for the record, Z as in zebra, U-T, Z as in zebra. Peter, thank you. Department of Education. Thank you for that question. I'm going to be very frank and transparent. I wasn't expecting a question on the PCFP. I was expecting to be asked a question, why do we want this removed? However, we'd be happy to come back and provide that information to the Council or Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, because I think it's pretty clear that the reason why you wanted it to be removed is because it's a repeat of what happened with AB 400, if I'm understanding the background information. But I do still want to make sure that there's some place where that information is going to be reported and how it is going to be utilized.
Peter Zutz, for the record, thank you for clarifying the question for me, and I apologize. I didn't understand it initially. Yes, in fact, the reason we're requesting this NAC be deleted is because it's duplicated in federal law. We are required annually to report the dropout rate disaggregated by race and ethnicity for all students in grades 6 through 12. That information is reported on the report card, is available to all public scrutiny. And just to say it, the NAC we're asking to remove is less stringent. NAC requires grade 8, 9 through 12. So our federal law gathers 2 more grades, 6 and 7, in our annual reporting. So yes, that would be available for use within the department or otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. And Sheriff, I don't know if there's any other questions or not.
It does not appear so.
I'd like to make a motion then to adopt a regulation for 59-24.
All right, do we have a second? Second. All right, we have a motion from Assemblywoman Anderson, a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed, nay? Okay, and that regulation is approved. Thank you, Mr. Zutz. We will now turn to R075-24, which is a regulation repealing provisions relating to operating permits. Hopefully we have Mr. Tucker available for questions up in Carson City. It looks like we do. Senator Hansen, go ahead and ask your question when you're ready.
Thanks. Real basic question. You are removing a defense for emergencies from existing state law. That seems really, in an emergency situation, sometimes things have to be done. But if one of these businesses or whatever you guys are regulating in an emergency situation violates that, that will no longer be an acceptable excuse for violating the standard?
Danilo Dragoni, for the record, D-R-A-G-O-N-I. I'm Deputy Administrator for the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. Mr. Tucker is with me in case I don't know how to answer, but that's correct. However, thanks for the question. However, removing this affirmative defense from our regulation does not change the way the division has always been proceeding with this kind of a compliance and enforcement case. Because the removing the affirmative defense does not take away the ability of the division to exercise compliance and enforcement discretion. In fact, as far as I know, no facility has never been claiming affirmative defense for the past 20 years, because the approach has always been dialogue, compliance first and enforcement after. And so in situations where we would have an actual emergency, we would always exercise discretion. We will never really punish or provide penalties or enforce a facility that for unforeseeable causes had gone in non-compliance.
Okay, well, that pretty much answers it. In 20 years, you haven't had a single one of these cases anyway. And if, in fact, something like that did happen, you have, I guess you could call it prosecutorial discretion. Okay, all right. That's my whole question, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, Senator Hansen, if you'd like to make a motion, we'll take it at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we pass RO 7524.
Okay, we have a motion from Senator Hansen, a second from Senator Stone. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? All right, seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you. Next up, R078-24, which is a regulation establishing provisions relating to grants. I believe we have Ms. Colleen Platt available to answer questions here. Senator Daly, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, I'm for the grant process and the housing division and all this stuff, doing this. Just a comment more than anything, a real question, and maybe you can take it back to your people and they can keep it in the back of their mind when they're doing this. So in, what is it, Section 1, subsection 5, and it says, in determining whether to approve or reject an application for a grant from the Supportive Housing Grant Program. Division will consider the following criteria. So I have two comments there. So the first one says, the experience of the applicant in developing supporting housing and affordable housing and provided supporting services. My experience with that being the first criteria is it tends to favor, since we're a smaller state, not as many resources, tends to favor someone from another state. Someone who has much more experience than the guy. You may have a local guy capable of doing it, but the criteria comes down, oh, well, they don't have experience or as much experience. I see the same thing, and this is the tendency that I've seen on the construction side, under construction manager at risk. One of the considerations is, well, how much experience do they have at construction manager at risk? They may have built everything under the sun, design, build, hard bids, but they didn't do it under construction manager at risk, so they're just not qualified. I remember, and some people may remember Helms Construction, out of business now, but they were one of the largest construction, dirt moving engineering companies in northern Nevada, and they were not allowed to do a golf course work because they didn't have enough experience. And they said, well, how do I get experience building golf courses? Well, you got to build some golf courses to get that experience, right? So I just think that it's well-meaning, misguided, doesn't really get you the outcome you want, especially if you're looking for a local provider who may be perfectly capable, just doesn't have the experience. And then they're precluded from getting the experience so they can put it on their resume in the future. Second comment, and maybe it's a question. Number I, under the same category as the criteria, any other criteria that division determines to be applicable. When are you going to disclose? Is there going to be some RFP or something that says, hey, these are the other things that aren't listed there that we're adding in? Or is it, I just don't want it to be someone's discretion and I get to pick my, my cousin's brother or something because I added in this other criteria that says the cousin's brother is preferred. So how do you disclose that?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Christine Hess, CFO with the Housing Division here. Thank you, Senator Daley. I always love your questions, and you really asked some great ones. And I know it's pushing in the afternoon, so I don't want to take the committee's time, but you do reach a passion of mine here at the division and of ours here at the division, and I love the way that the team reviews these. So first of all, regarding your comment and the experience component of determining eligibility, one of the things at the Housing Division that we encourage is partnering with more experienced developers. That in and of itself would be qualifying. And in the case of affordable housing, so I'm going to talk subsidized housing when you have tax credits and things like that, or other federal funding sources, it really is a risk from a compliance perspective to the state, whether it's compliance regarding federal funds or state funds, when there's no experience, right? So that experience can look a lot of different ways. You can, again, partner, whether it's with a finance consultant or with a partner developer maybe for your first one, and we do see that happening. In this particular case, it's even more important. Supportive housing, we don't have a lot of it here in Nevada, but we do need a lot of it, and it's even more specialized. So regarding this first criteria, I will tell you right now we do have some supportive housing development that's being funded by the Home Means Nevada initiative, and the great news is they're being funded by Home ARP and the Community Housing Fund. I met with 2 projects just this week, and they are being done by local developers, local nonprofits, and nonprofit service providers. So while we're not deep, right, in our bench, we certainly have some leaders in the state. Additionally, when it comes to the tax credit program, we do give a couple extra points for in-state developers. That does not mean, however, that we aren't seeing a lot of out-of-state developers come, but at the Housing Division, we also are excited to see the competition and also see our in-state members really rise to the occasion with the designs they're putting forward, the costs they're reviewing, the structures that they're looking at. So I do appreciate that comment. Certainly, we definitely want to encourage emerging developers, but also still lift up the industry and provide quality housing. So what I think you'll see is from the Housing Division, which would be consistent across our programs, is not an X/no on an application, but more a conversation to encourage the partnership with more experienced developers. So that would be one remark to your first question, but certainly I'm going to bring that back to the team, so thank you. Regarding any other criteria the division determines to be applicable, we're so excited to launch this program. So the program guidance has also already undergone a public workshop. So a couple of the criteria, for example, that we listed in our original program guidance that was a working draft in May, that we are finalizing now as we prepare to, hopefully with the approval of these regs, open a pre-application and then application period, would be, for example, the Housing Division will evaluate each application for a grant in accordance with the overall program criteria and including, so we list two additional, the number of supportive housing units supported, the number of individuals supported. So certainly nothing shocking to the group, but things that have been seen in advance.
And thank you for that. And on the first part, very thoughtful answer. I understand there's a lot of criterias and various things. And with your response, my notes I wrote down is experience of the candidate is stupid. So maybe that was a little harsh. I'm kidding you. Just so you have it in your mind and when you're thinking about it and the partnering, because there are risks on the other side, I understand, and it's one criteria. However, it's right at the top, right? And then also understand that things change. I just wanted to make sure that any additional criteria are going to be disclosed at the beginning of the application process so that everyone's on the same scorecard and being evaluated under the same known criteria. And I think you answered both of those. I just always worry about that. Well, you have to have experience in order to do this, and the only way to get experience is to do this, and it becomes a catch-22.
Madam Chair, Senator Daly, if I may just follow up, and apologies I didn't also address this initially. One of the amazing parts of Assembly Bill 310 that established this fund is it did set aside $2.2 million of the $32.2 million appropriated for capacity building training and evaluation. So Senator Daly, to your point, I think the legislature and Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno in her leadership in bringing this forward does recognize the significance of building capacity of our future leaders and future developers. So that will also be launching this fall. And so we'll be looking forward to building that capacity formally through this program.
Those are all my questions, Madam Chair. When you're ready, you can come back. I'll make a motion.
Any additional questions from commission members? All right, Senator Daly, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Move to approve R078-24.
We have a motion from Senator Daly, a second from Senator Stone. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, hearing none, that regulation is approved. Thank you, Ms. Hess. We will now turn to R082-24, which is a regulation revising various provisions relating to information services. And hopefully we have someone from the Office of the Chief Information Officer within the Office of the Governor. Looks like we do. Senator Daly, I'll turn it to you for your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just, again, want to get some reassurances, if you will. I know in like the very first section, Section 1, underlined and bolded and all that. It says that people have to comply with the provisions of the state information security policy standards and procedures. If I read this correctly and got all the way through it, that's a national type group that sets and recommends policies to the state, and then you guys review it. And if there's provisions in there that aren't suitable for the state, so it's an adoption by reference. Now, obviously, I haven't read that. But then with the deletion of several sections down below always causes me some concern. Where are the guardrails or some of those processes that are in the deleted sections, of which there's what, like 15 of them? Are some of those things covered there? I couldn't see it clearly. I wanted to make sure that they are, that there's some guardrails on what we're doing. I know this is an old office with a new name and some new authority from 431 last session. And I know there was a lot of concern and various things over the guardrails on that. I just want to make sure that they're in place. And I was on the audit subcommittee just the other day, and there were some concerns over some of the things that were happening, maybe not under your watch, but concerns over some of the things that had happened there. I just want to make sure we have the guardrails and accountability and those types of things in place.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, my name is Timothy Galuzzi. I have the honor of serving as the Chief Information Officer for the state of Nevada. Galuzzi is spelled G-A-L-L-U-Z-I for the benefit of the record. Madam Chair, through you to the Senator, to answer your question about the state's information security policies, standards, and procedures. That is not a federal guideline. That manual is actually curated, built, maintained, and created by the State Information Security Committee, which has representatives of information security officers from across the executive branch. This is done so we bring all of the experts that have a vested interest in the security of their executive branch agencies to the table to hear what not only their needs are from their agencies, but to hear from that expertise. And that committee is guided by CIS controls, so the Center for Internet Security. And that was actually I believe that was passed in the 2011 session that dictated that our state information security policies and standards would be aligned to a national standard, and the CIS controls were that national standard that we aligned all of our security standards to. So in a way, yes, we are aligned to those federal standards. To give a bit of historical context on this regulation change, this regulation, NAC 242, has not been updated since 2012. And that was when there was the last significant change in this organization was when it was the Department of IT. And the only changes that were done at the time was some minor name changes in who led the organization. And so there was some clarifying changes within the reg at the time. So there was no substantive changes with the organizational structure and whatnot to align the regulation to the new operations. So to really surmise, there is still controls in place, and we do have robust information security governance that's in place. We also, in the past year, have stood up a statewide IT governance that goes beyond just the cybersecurity and information security policies and standards, that we're actually going to be looking at IT policies, IT standards that are outside of the purview of cybersecurity and information security. And so we'll probably be back here to kind of codify that governance structure in a future regulation change.
Excuse me. Thank you for some of that clarification. I just wanted to maybe put it in my mind if I heard what you said correctly. So we have a state commission, a board of the experts of the executive branch agencies, or at least some of the major ones are represented. They've developed a policy that's in alignment with federal, national, or accepted standards that go across all of the states. May not be exactly, but so then if there's a change in those other standards, then you would look at if it's suitable for Nevada, updating our manual to stay in alignment. And that's where when you're deleting, what a project is and those types of things, I just wanted to make sure that it's still going to operate similar to where you're at, and that obviously everybody has something at stake in making sure that the computer systems that we all rely on are updated and secure. So I just wanted to clarify some of that so I understood it better. And it's kind of like we have Nevada OSHA. We still have to follow and comport with the federal rules. We have our own book. We can have higher standards than what that book says, but we can't have lower standards. So it's similar to that relationship.
For the record, again, this is Timothy Galuzzi, State CAO. To answer your question, yes, we are still in alignment with those CIS controls. A lot of the deletion, it was duplicative language from language that exists in NRS that really wasn't appropriate to exist in NAC as well. So a lot of this was also cleanup.
Very good, thank you. That was all I had, Madam Chair.
Okay, I don't see any questions, Senator Daly. If you're comfortable, we'll accept a motion at this time.
Move to approve R082-24.
Okay, we have a motion from Senator Daly, and we'll take a second from Senator Dondera Loop. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, hearing none. Regulation 082-24 is approved. Next up is R086-24, which is a regulation revising provisions relating to payrolling. I believe hopefully we have Ms. Nelson with us to answer questions. Senator Daly, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you guys were probably hoping for a lower number. I mean, you could, we take them in order. You had to wait all the way to the end. A quick question, and I read this thing like 3 times, and I was trying to understand the payrolling. Not sure I still got it. But in Section 1, subsection 2A, so when the employee unit pays a standard contribution rate or is assigned a contribution rate in classes 10 to 8, inclusive, blah, blah, blah. So who's the assigning party, and can it be lower than class 10 to 18, or can it be just the, standard contribution? I don't know what that is. So how are you determining what that is when you're then can potentially assign a rate, and who assigns? And what criteria do they use? Can it be less than the 10? Anyway.
Okay. For the record, Troy Jordan, Jordan, Deputy Director of DETR. Those rates are actually what we call rate buckets, and they're assigned through the statutory process by Chief Economist David Schmidt. The reason we started with 10 for this regulation is that we're loosening this up a bit, but the rate number 10 is the new business rate, meaning that they would pay the same as a new business if they created a company to do their payrolling. That's why 10 was chosen. Okay. And these businesses are assigned based on their history to each individual bucket. For example, there are very few in 18, there are very few in 1, but the average tax rate currently is 1.65%, and that would be in bucket 10. Or excuse me, that is not bucket 10, that is the average tax rate. Bucket 10 is the new tax rate of 2.95.
Okay, so if I got this right on the payrolling, it's like using manpower or somebody like that for whatever it is. And if they send somebody out to be in a secretary pool or whatever, they're going to have a different experience rating based on the company they're sending it to. If they send it to a company that has a horrible experience rating, they'd be paying more. And I know there's other language in this regulation that says they can't pay less than what that other company that they was actually provided the service. And I know you have some of that where people try to use a different classification, call the person a secretary pool when they're out doing construction, which is going to have a completely different experience rating. And that's where I was trying to get to. So who's going to make that assignment? Is it going to be based on, you guys have to go then and follow up who was the services actually provided to, and what is their rating? At least can't be less than that. But when I see it, the unit pays the standard contribution rate, I don't know what that is, or a rate assigned to them, and you said starting at 10 to 18. So it's never going to be less than 10, or going to be the standard contribution rate?
As I understand it, to take advantage of this provision in this regulation to allow this, they can't have a rating less than 10.
Okay. Okay. I think trying to get to it on the nuances of these things, and I know people have gamed the system for a long time, and I know you guys are out there trying to make sure people are doing it properly and correctly. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a loophole here for them, someone to take advantage. And then the follow-up that they have to pay at least the rate of the company they're providing the service to is a secondary follow-up on your end. So those were my questions, Madam Chair. I think I got satisfactory answers, so I'm glad it won't be less than 10 at the very least.
All right, Senator Daley, I don't see any questions, so we'll accept a motion at this time.
Motion to approve R086-24.
All right, we have a motion from Senator Daley and a second from Senator Dondera Loop. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay? Hearing none, Regulation 086-24 is approved. Okay, on to the last regulation that was pulled for the day, that is R093-24, regulation revising provisions regarding scholarship organization reporting dates. I will turn it over to you, Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. My question has to do with the decision to extend the calendar, because this is the date almost to 6 months after the time frame of when those events would be taking place. So just wondering if that is consistent with other reports that are necessary for education areas, whether it is for the charter school or for other traditional school districts, since this is asking actually to extend the time frame of a report from 3 months after the new year to 6 months. So just wondering if that is in fact consistent.
This is Barbara Bedell. I am the Education Programs Professional in the Nevada Department of Education's Office of Student and School Supports, supporting private schools. Unfortunately, Senator, I do not, Assemblywoman, I don't know the answer to that question. I will let you know that the reason why we have asked for the extension would be to include the assessment reports in that. We get a lot of questions regarding the assessments, and the assessments are not due until June 15th. Also, it is mandated by NRS 388D.280 that it is a calendar year report, but we also include the fiscal year or school year report because we get a lot of requests for that data as well. So we'd like to include that in this report. And so that's the reasoning behind it. Not so much for the calendar year report. You are correct in that the mandate is for the calendar year report, but we get a lot of requests for this other data. Also, the calendar year report does not jive with the demographics report and things like that, because those are also school year reports.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So then my follow-up question then is this information ever utilized by the interim finance committee in their August reports or their August meetings? Because if so, not having that information until after July or July 31st would take away the date that is usually these reports are required by us or for use during that August meeting. So I don't know if that made sense or not. I'm hoping it did.
We have never had such a request. This is Barbara Bedell again. And I forgot to spell my name. I'm sorry. It's B-A-R-B-A-R-A. And that's B as in Bravo, I as in India, D as in David, E as in Edward, L as in Lion, L as in Lion.
Thank you very much then for that clarification. So none of this information, whether it has been for the test scores or for how much money has in fact been, or how much these scholarships have been utilized, have ever been asked by the interim finance committee. It's other organizations that are asking for this. So that's where my confusion is coming from.
That is correct. So we do get data requests from outside organizations, from other agencies, things like that. But we have not had anything from.
Thank you. That's the end of my questions, and it's satisfactory. I'm not a big fan of it. However, I will accept those answers. So, Chair, when you are ready, more than happy to make a motion if needed.
Yes, please.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt regulation, 93-24.
Is there a second? Okay, we have a motion from Assemblywoman Anderson, a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, not hearing any. That regulation is approved. That completes our consideration of administrative regulations today. Thank you, commission members, and thank you to the representatives of the agencies who were with us to provide information. The next item is item 5, which is appointment of members to committees and similar entities. Commission members, the documentation for this item is on the dais in front of you. We have, again, Mr. Asher Killian to assist us with the appointment of members to various committees and similar entities. Mr. Killian, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel, and in the interest of time, as we approach the evening of Friday the 13th, I will be as brief as possible. There is one change to the list in front of you on item A. The recommendation is that only the first bullet point be considered and not the second and third bullet points, so only the reappointment of Jonathan Getty. There are 5 bodies for the Legislative Commission to consider appointments to. These are the Advisory Council on Mortgage Investments and Mortgage Lending, the Commission on Nuclear Projects, the Legislative Committee for the Review and Oversight of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and Marlette Lake Water System, the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws, and the Nevada Silver-Haired Legislative Forum. The recommended members for appointment are listed on the sheet in front of you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about any of those bodies or any of those suggested members.
Thank you, Mr. Killian. Do any members of the commission have any questions? Or is there any discussion on this item? Okay, not seeing any, we will accept a motion.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion from the speaker to approve the appointments as read by Mr. Killian. Is there a second? Second. We have a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, thank you. All those opposed, nay. Okay, the motion is approved. Next on the agenda is item 6, which is the approval of early session hires for the 2025 legislative session. This is a pretty standard item for us at this time in the interim, but I believe our legislative counsel, Mr. Killian, will be able to answer any questions that you may have about this request from our staff. Are there any questions or discussion on this particular item? Okay, is there a motion for approval? Is there a second? Second. We have a motion from Speaker Yeager, a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Will those members in favor please signify by saying aye? Aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, nay? The motion is approved. The next item on the agenda is consideration of the Legislative Commission resolution celebrating the establishment of Taiwan and recognizing the anniversary of the sister state relationship between the state of Nevada and Taiwan. Our legislative counsel, Mr. Killian, will present this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. The text of this resolution is in your packet and available on the public website. This is a resolution that this body traditionally approves each year to be presented this time in celebration of the 113th National Day and the 39th anniversary of our sister state relationship with Taiwan. I'm happy to answer any questions that the Commission may have.
Commission members, any questions on this motion or on this item, excuse me?
Chair, Assemblyman P.K. O'Neill. If I may.
Assemblyman O'Neill, please.
Hopefully just a quick question. How will we deliver the resolution? I'm in favor of it. I'm just curious how or what medium will we use to deliver it? Well, and Chair, you may have heard that comment by my fellow assembly person. The reason why I am asking that is I have recently received an invitation to attend a dinner event at the Taiwanese consulate in San Francisco.
Assemblyman O'Neill, I believe the resolution could probably hitch a ride with you. That's traditionally how we deliver it. That's my understanding from our staff. We would have it arrive at the consulate in San Francisco.
Well, that's why I was curious. Do we have somebody else, the speaker, or I don't know the formality. I apologize.
Assemblyman O'Neill, I'm not aware of whether there's anyone who traditionally delivers the resolution, but I'm sure we can arrange with staff after the meeting for you to do so if you'd like.
I think I'd like actually I would be interested in doing. I've developed a relationship with some of the Taiwanese government recently, so it would be interesting to me, and I'd appreciate it if that's acceptable to the body as a whole.
Assemblyman, would you like to make a motion?
If you could help me phrase that one, I would pass. I would make a recommendation that we pass and receive the resolution for our celebration with our sister state, and that I don't know, it would be appropriate that I'd volunteer to deliver it.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the resolution and designate Assemblyman O'Neill as the courier. A second from Senator Stone. Any discussion on the motion? Speaker Yeager.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. Assemblyman O'Neill, just want to say thank you for volunteering to do that. I think traditionally, if we had members who were going to that celebration that you've been invited to, they would deliver it. My request would just be that you take some photos and send it back to us so we can confirm that you have successfully delivered the proclamation and celebrate Taiwan.
And Chair, if I may say to our illustrious speaker, I would love to do that. Unfortunately, since it would just be me, it's difficult to take photographs of myself. Maybe possibly Assemblywoman Anderson would like to attend also. But I will make sure there are pictures taken.
Thank you, Assemblyman O'Neill. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, the motion is approved. Next up, our General Counsel, Kevin Powers, will provide us with a report regarding litigation. This is item number 8. I believe Mr. Powers is presenting remotely. Mr. Powers, go ahead and begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Kevin Powers, General Counsel. I have 3 cases to report on today, and we'll move quickly given the lateness of the hour. First case is National Taxpayers Union versus Lombardo. That's in the First Judicial District Court in Carson City. On January 2nd, 2024, the plaintiffs filed a complaint that raised several constitutional claims challenging specific provisions of Senate Bill number 420 of the 2021 regular session. Those provisions of the bill relate to the health benefit plan known as the public option, codified in NRS Chapter 695K. Even though the public option provisions were enacted during the 2021 regular session, those provisions do not become effective and operative until January 1st, 2026. In the district court proceedings, LCB Legal filed a motion to dismiss on behalf of the legislature, and the AG's office filed a motion to dismiss on behalf of the state executive defendants. In the motions to dismiss, the defendants argued that the complaint should be dismissed for lack of subject matter jurisdiction because the plaintiffs did not comply with the requirements of NRS Chapter 41 to bring a lawsuit against the state government. The defendants also argued that the plaintiffs did not have standing to bring their constitutional claims and that their claims were not ripe for adjudication. On July 30th, 2024, the district court entered an order granting the motions to dismiss for lack of subject matter jurisdiction. The district court agreed with the defendants' arguments, both on failing to bring the lawsuit under the requirements of NRS Chapter 41 and also based on standing and ripeness. Because the district court dismissed for lack of subject matter jurisdiction, the district court did not rule on the merits of the constitutional claims. The plaintiffs did not file a notice of appeal within the period prescribed by the Nevada Rules of Appellate Procedure. Therefore, this case is closed. The next case to report on is Strong Public Schools Nevada versus State of Nevada. On February 5th, 2024, the plaintiffs filed a complaint that raised several state constitutional claims challenging certain provisions of Senate Bill 1 of the 35th Special Session 2023. This bill is the Southern Nevada Tourism Innovation Act, and it relates to the financing of a Major League Baseball stadium project in Clark County, Nevada. In the district court proceedings, LCB Legal filed a motion to dismiss on behalf of the legislature, and the AG's office filed a motion to dismiss on behalf of the state executive defendants. In the motions to dismiss, the defendants argued that the complaint should be dismissed for lack of subject matter jurisdiction because the plaintiffs did not have standing to bring their state constitutional claims, and also because the claims were not ripe for adjudication. On September 6, 2024, the district court entered an order granting the motions to dismiss for lack of subject matter jurisdiction. District court agreed that there was no standing and the claims were not ripe for adjudication. Because the district court dismissed for lack of subject matter jurisdiction, the district court did not reach the merits of the state constitutional claims. If the plaintiffs want to appeal from the district court's decision, they must file a notice of appeal by October 10th, 2024. The last case to report on is a case that I have not reported on before. It is Elko County versus State of Nevada. On February 26, 2024, the plaintiffs filed a complaint for declaratory relief that raises several state constitutional claims challenging certain provisions of Assembly Bill number 519 of the 2023 regular session. That bill provides for the financing of certain capital improvement projects by county school districts. Because this lawsuit challenges only certain provisions of AB 519, I believe it will be helpful to provide an overview of which specific provisions are being challenged. Elko County is challenging only sections 2 and 8 of AB 519. Under section 2, the Board of County Commissioners of a county whose population is 52,500 or more and less than 57,500 is required to levy local property taxes in an amount not less than 1 cent and not more than 25 cents on each $100 of assessed valuation within the county for the purpose of financing capital projects of county school districts, including capital projects for schools located on tribal lands. Under the challenge provisions of Section 8, if such a Board of County Commissioners fails to adopt such an ordinance by June 30th, 2024, The local property taxes would be levied by operational law at the maximum rate of 25 cents per 100 of assessed valuation. And then those local property taxes would be collected and administered in the same manner as other taxes. Now, with regard to sections 2 and section 8, Elko County is arguing that those sections are unconstitutional because they are special and local laws that violate Article 4, sections 20, 21, and 25 of the Nevada Constitution. We must emphasize that Elko County is not challenging the constitutionality of any other provisions of the bill. For example, the bill has an appropriation of $64.5 million for the Elko County School District for the construction of a school on the Duck Valley Indian Reservation, which would replace the Oahe Combined School. In the lawsuit, Elko County is not challenging the constitutionality of this appropriation. Again, the limitation of the challenge is to sections 2 and 8 of AB 519. In the district court proceedings, LCB Legal filed a motion to dismiss on behalf of the legislature, and the AG's office filed a motion to dismiss on behalf of the state executive defendants. In response, Elko County filed a counter motion for summary judgment. The parties have completed briefing on their respective motions, and the district court will determine whether it will hear oral arguments on the motions or whether it will decide the motions on the briefs without oral arguments. Thank you, Madam Chair. That is the overview of the 3 cases. I am certainly open for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. I think we have one from Speaker Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Always appreciate your update. On the last case that you talked about, the Elko County case, do you know how that lawsuit was instituted? Meaning, do you know, was it a vote by the Elko County Commission, or was it like who authorized that suit? Are you aware of that?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Specifically, I am not aware of whether or not Elko County, their Board of County Commissioners, voted to approve filing the lawsuit. That is the general procedure that needs to be made in a county. If you're going to authorize filing a lawsuit, then generally the Board of County Commissioners, by their majority vote, has to approve the filing of that lawsuit. That has to be done in a public open meeting. So there would be a record of when and where the Board of County Commissioners approved such a lawsuit. If they did not, that would be problematic. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. And then one other question. I know we never know what a court's going to do, but if in this particular case, Elko prevailed in the lawsuit, what would the impact be of that decision in terms of that assembly bill that was passed in reference to building the school out there? Are you able to make any conclusions about what would happen?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, as I mentioned, Elko County is only challenging the provisions in section 2 and 8 that deal with levying the tax for ongoing capital improvement projects. Elko County is not challenging the appropriation for the Oahe replacement school. So that appropriation of $64.5 million would still be in place. We have argued in the litigation that any provisions of the legislation, should they be struck down, should be severed from the other provisions of the bill. So generally, there's a rule in favor of severability, and the courts usually follow that rule of severability. So even if sections 2 and 8 are stricken, then the other sections of the bill should go forward. That would mean the appropriation for the Oahe school replacement would still go forward. In addition, section 3 of the bill allows certain counties of a certain population, which would include Elko County, to impose taxes for school improvement projects. So even if section 2 was struck down, Elko County could potentially proceed under section 3 to provide any additional funding that would be necessary for the replacement of the Oahe school. Right now, there's like the $64.5 million appropriation. If more money was necessary, then Elko County could finance it through section 3, or they can use any other money in their capital improvement projects. I hope that answers the speaker question. Thank you.
It does. Thank you so much, Mr. Powers.
Senator Dondero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Powers, is it possible for us to have an update at some point? I just am concerned about if the challenge goes one way or the other and what will happen with the school. And so if we could have an update as this goes on, let us know. Because I recognize that they're not challenging the 65 million, but if the other piece happens, there could be not enough money for the school. Am I right?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the senator. Because that's a fiscal question, I couldn't answer it, and I think only Elko County or the State Department of Education would know the consequence of losing that second revenue stream under sections 2 and 8 of the bill. Again, if the costs of the replacement school exceed the appropriation from the legislature, Elko County School District still has other funds in their capital improvement project fund right now. Elko County does have those funds, so the Elko County School District could tap into those funds to provide additional money if there's any cost overruns beyond the 64.5 million. And again, there's another provision of the bill that could allow for Elko County to impose other bond levies to finance any additional cost overruns. I anticipate that if there are cost overruns and we're in the legislative session, that Elko County would be coming to the legislature as well. But obviously, as your legal counsel, we will be keeping you up to date on the progress of this litigation and any decision by the district court that would strike any part of the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
All right. Any additional questions for Mr. Powers?
I have one, Madam Chair.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you. Of course, this bill is near and dear to my heart for a variety of reasons. And the whole tax thing was, frankly, a problem in the bill, but we worked our way around it and convinced them to go forward with it. Question I have for Kevin is there anything in law that would have prevented, once the bill was passed and signed by the governor, the Elko County Commission simply revoking the tax that they had passed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the senator. If there's a legal duty in a statute for a Board of County Commissioners to impose a tax and they fail to do so, or if they enact the tax and they later repeal the tax, under either of those scenarios, the recourse would be for someone with a standing and interest to bring a lawsuit against the Board of County Commissioners, and it would be a lawsuit for either injunctive relief or writ relief, asking the court to order the Board of County Commissioners to perform their duty under the law. Under those circumstances, if the statute was clear and there were no defenses that Elko County could raise, the court would enter an injunction or writ of mandamus directing the board to perform their statutory duty. If the board failed to perform its statutory duty, all those board members would be subject to whatever remedies authorized by the law. Those remedies could be contempt findings, violations, and even being jailed for failure to perform their statutory duties. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, well, let me follow up on that then. Then is that tax now permanent? The county commission can never go back and modify it or eliminate it? I mean, there must be a time, 10 years down the road, they're still going to have this tax on the books and they can't do anything about it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the senator. The way Section 2 reads is that the Board of County Commissioners has to impose the tax, and it has to be between 1 cent and 25 cents on $100 of assessed valuation. At the moment, Elko County has chosen to impose the tax at the 25-cent maximum amount. They are required, the Board of County Commissioners of Elko County is required to continue to impose that tax until the legislation is changed. However, they do have the discretion under the law to lower the tax down to anywhere to 1 cent on $100 of assessed valuation. So even though the tax has to remain in place until the legislation is changed, the Board of County Commissioners has the discretionary authority to assess the amount of the tax between that 1 cent and 25-cent level. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, well, that raises a bunch of other interesting questions, especially since it's limited to a county between 52 and 57 or whatever it was, which is pretty specific. But anyway, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to go too far in the weeds on this one, but yeah, actually I hope LCB is successful in this, although I have to admit when that provision in the bill was there. We were very worried that was going to be a death sentence, but Governor Lombardo, to his credit, went ahead and signed the bill because recognizing that the greater good for the children of Oahe, the Duck Valley Indian Reservation, took precedent over what ended up being a tiny tax that they already had the revenue for. That's an interesting part about it, too. Elko County did not raise the tax. They simply reallocated an existing tax that was already in place. Anyway, thanks, Madam Chair.
All right, any additional questions for Mr. Powers? Okay, this is not an action item, and so we will thank Mr. Powers and move on to item number 9, which is our second period of public comment. We'll be accepting public comment at this time from persons present here in the Nevada Legislature office building in Las Vegas, then from those attending the meeting at the Legislative Building in Carson City, and then from persons wishing to provide public comment by phone. Please remember that comments will be limited to not more than 2 minutes per person. If there are any people in our audience here in Las Vegas who wish to provide public comment at this time, please come forward to the table in front of the dais. Not seeing anyone. We'll go ahead and go up to Carson City. All right, you can go ahead and begin when you're ready. Just remember to identify yourself and ensure that you sign in on the clipboard.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name's Mary Przinski, Pierczynski, here representing NAS. And we'd like to thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for sending R099-23 back for more work. Many of you made some very pertinent comments, and Senator Don Darrell Loop alluded to something that's very important, and that is when kids start high school and they're set on a certain graduation path and they know what they have to do to get that diploma, that should not be changed. And we will go back and work on this regulation again and try to get that straightened out. We appreciate it. We've been working on this since April, so thanks.
All right, anyone else in Carson City for public comment? Not seeing anyone. We can move to public comment by phone. If you've called in and would like to speak during this part of the meeting, you'll be notified by our broadcast and production services staff when you've been connected and it's your turn to speak. Please remember that comments will be limited to not more than 2 minutes per person, and you're welcome to submit any additional comments in writing, and they will be added to the record for this meeting. I'm going to turn it over now to our staff of the broadcast and production services to queue up anyone calling in to speak. BPS, is there anyone on the line?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Aw, shucks. Okay. Seeing no further business to come before the Legislative Commission, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Chair.